The number on the primary lattice readout was wrong, and Subsurgeon Tuil Seret had checked it 4 times. Baseline for a first-tier sensory species. The crystalline Ilu, who could hear a heartbeat through a bulkhead, sat at 400 on the Kadri's scale. The readout above the surgical cradle said the human girl was at 410 and still climbing, and the widening had been running for less than a quarter shift. "Recalibrate the instrument," said Prime Surgeon Ves Ordal, without looking up from his 4 hands. 2 of them were inside the girl's sensory crown, laying filament. The other 2 hung folded against his chest still, the way a Sethvani surgeon kept them when he wanted the room to believe he was calm. Tuil recalibrated the instrument. He ran the diagnostic thread, cleared the cache, forced a fresh sample against the reference block. The reference block was a sealed Ilu cortex, dead 9 years, kept for exactly this. The block read 400 dead on, the way it always did. Then the machine looked at the human again. 430, Tuil said. His voice came out thinner than he wanted it to. "Prime, the instrument is not wrong, she is." The surgical bay hung in the bright band of the Meridian Institute, where the station's spin carried it through the daylight side of the blue world below every 90 minutes, and the daylight was on them now. It came flat and white through the long observation dome, washing the cradle, the racked instruments, the 6 senior members of the Kadri standing in their tiered gallery with their 4 arms folded and their reading eyes narrowed. Everything in the bay was pale and clean and lit like a laboratory should be lit, and in the middle of all that clean light lay a human, and the human was the only dark thing in the room. She was small. That was the first thing anyone noted about her, the thing that had gotten her selected in the first place: small, unremarkable. A salvage hand pulled off a bonded frontier crew with no house to answer for her and no cortex worth cataloging. 20 of her years, by the human count. Short brown hair matted flat with the conductive gel. A faint scar through one eyebrow that the intake physician had noted and never explained. Her name, on the manifest, was Juno Hale. She had not made a sound since the widening began. That too was in Tuil's notes. Subjects of every prior species had screamed. The widening did not damage tissue. It did not need to. It worked in the fine architecture of perception, threading a lattice through the sensory cortex so that the brain could carry more signal than the species had ever been built to carry. But the mind did not know that. The mind felt the world get louder, sharper, wider, and the mind panicked, and the mouth screamed, and the restraints earned their keep. Juno Hale had not pulled against the restraints once. "Deepen the flow," Ordal said. "Prime." "Deepen the flow, Subsurgeon." Tuil deepened the flow. The readout climbed. 460, 480. The reference species, every reference species, scrolled by on the comparative column and fell behind, one after another, the way a slow vessel falls behind a fast one. The Ilu, the deep-diving Moroth, the storm-riding Vane who could feel weather 3 days out. Each of them a marvel of a homeworld's long cruelty. Each of them a name a young surgeon learned in his first year and was taught to respect. The human passed them the way she might have passed a row of parked machines, without seeming to notice they were there. At 500, the comparative column ran out of species, and the machine, having nothing left to compare her to, simply printed a flat line and the word unclassified. The gallery had gone very quiet. Sethvani did not gasp. They stilled. 6 senior surgeons stood in the white daylight with all 24 of their arms folded and did not move, and the stillness was its own kind of noise. "There," Ordal said softly, and now he did look up, and his reading eyes were bright with the particular joy of a man watching his life's argument prove itself in front of the people who had doubted it. "There, you see, I told the conquered the ceiling was a lie. There is no ceiling. There is only the substrate you begin with, and the substrate." He turned one folded hand toward the small dark shape on the cradle. "The substrate we were handed by a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that stood up on it. You cannot buy that substrate. You cannot breed it in a clean tank in 6 generations. You can only harvest it. She is above the Ilu, said one of the gallery, an old surgeon named Daishi, and there was less joy in her voice than in Ordal's. Prime. She is above every catalogued species by a fifth, and the procedure is not complete. I am aware. Do you intend to complete it? I intend, said Ordal, to find the ceiling if there is one. Tuil looked at the girl. He should not have. A surgeon watched his instruments, not the meat on the cradle. That was the first discipline. But the readout had stopped meaning anything. A number past the last species is only a number, and so Tuil Sarat, 22 months out of his certification, looked at the human's face instead of the machine's and found that her eyes were open. They should not have been open. The widening ran the subject deep under, dreaming, so that the flood of new signal had nowhere to go but the sleeping cortex. Every subject stayed under until the surgeons brought them up. The girl's eyes were open, and they were not glassy, and they were not rolled back, and they were not screaming. They were looking at him. Not at the ceiling, not at the light. At him, at Subsurgeon Tuil Sarat, standing at the instrument bank on the girl's left, half behind a rack, in a bay full of 40 motionless people. Her eyes had found the one person in the room who was afraid. Tuil did not move. He told himself she was sedated, that the eyes were open on a dead reflex, that a brain drowning in 500 units of signal it had never been built to hold was not tracking anything, could not be tracking anything. The girl's mouth moved. It was barely a word. The gel had dried at the corner of her lips and cracked when they parted. But Tuil had spent 2 years reading the mouths of sedated patients, and he read this one, and what it said, quietly only to him, was, "You're going to be sick." Tuil Sarat turned and was sick into the disposal chute 11 seconds later. He had not known he was going to be. He had felt fine as a man watching a chart break the last rung of the ladder could feel. It was only when she said it that the sickness arrived, rising up from somewhere below thought, and by the time he understood it was coming he was already at the chute. When he straightened, wiped his mouth and turned back, the gallery was watching him and not the girl. Ordal's 4 eyes had narrowed to slits. "Subsurgeon." "Prime," Tuil's voice would not steady. "She's awake. She is sedated to a depth of 9. She is not awake. She spoke to me." The bay went, if anything, quieter. Ordal set down his laying filament with a precision that was its own answer, walked the 3 steps to the head of the cradle, and looked down into the human's open eyes. "Subject," he said, in the flat trade tongue the conquered used with lesser species, "can you hear me?" Juno Hale did not look at him. Her eyes stayed on Tuil. "Ask him," she said. Her voice was a dry rasp, unhurried, almost bored. "He knows the number better than you do. He's been checking it while you talk." Ordal's folded hands came unfolded. That was the thing the gallery would talk about afterward, in the corridors, in the low, careful way of people who had seen something they were not ready to have seen. Not the readout. Not the impossible chart. The moment the prime surgeon's hands came unfolded, all 4 of them, because a sedated human on a surgical cradle had told him, without turning her head, exactly which of his subordinates had been quietly doubting his numbers for the last quarter shift. She had not seen Tuil check the readout. She had been under. Her eyes had been closed for all of it. "Bring her up," Ordal said. "Prime, the procedure is not. Bring her up now, and clear the gallery." They did not clear the gallery. Sethvani surgeons did not leave a bay when the most important subject in the Institute's history was being brought out of a widening, not on the word of a prime who had gone, in the space of a minute, from triumphant to something none of them had a clean word for. They stayed, folded in the flat white daylight, and they watched the machine draw the girl up out of the deep, and they watched her wake. She woke the way a person wakes who has only been resting their eyes. There was no thrash, no disorientation. The subjects of every prior species had come up out of the widening like drowning things breaking the surface, clawing, screaming at the volume of a world that had grown teeth while they slept. Juno Hale opened her eyes the rest of the way, breathed in once through her nose, and lay still, taking inventory of a bay full of 40 aliens the way a person takes inventory of a room they have decided they are going to have to leave. "There's a lot of you," she said, "and you're all standing very still. That usually means someone's about to make a decision they don't want witnessed." Nobody answered her. "The tall one thinks I'm the greatest thing he's ever built." She tipped her chin barely at Ordle. "The old one on the left thinks he's already lost control of it." She's right. Her eyes moved unhurried and found Tuil again. "And you're wondering whether you should have said anything. You should have. You'd have felt sick either way. At least now you know why." Daishi, the old surgeon, spoke without meaning to, in the guild tongue, forgetting for a moment that the trade implant in the girl's ear would carry it to her anyway. "She reads intent." "I read you," Juno agreed in trade before the translation finished, which meant she had understood the guild tongue too, which no human had ever been fitted to do. "All of you. It's very loud. You should know that before this goes any further. Whatever you're about to do, I'm going to see it coming a long way off." Prime Surgeon Ves Ordle stood over the greatest result of his career and understood. In the cold and total way a surgeon understands a thing his hands have already done and cannot undo, that he had not upgraded a subject. He had taken the one predator in the galaxy that hunts by reading the intentions of everything around it, and he had, at enormous expense, over the objections of the Concord's ethics board, removed the ceiling on how well it could do that. "Governor," he said. The word was quiet, and it was not addressed to anyone in the room. Down at the base of the girl's newly laid lattice, seated where the cortex met the spine, there was a small Sethvani-built device, the cadre installed in every subject. A compliance governor, a leash of light that could reach up into the new architecture and flood it with noise, drown the augmented senses in static, bring the subject to the floor writhing and blind and grateful to be switched off. It was standard. It had never failed. It was the reason the cadre could hand a widened predator back to its bondholder and sleep at night. Ordle spoke the activation word, and every surgeon in the gallery relaxed by a fraction, because now the room was safe, now the leash was in his hand. Juno Hale was already sitting up. The restraints were open. Nobody had opened them. That was not true. Tuil would review the log 100 times in the days that followed, and the log was clear. The ventral restraint had been released by the cradle's own safety system 4 seconds before Ordle spoke the governor word, because the cradle's safety system was wired to release a subject whose vitals spiked toward cardiac event, and the girl's vitals had spiked toward cardiac event, cleanly and deliberately, by a method no one could name, 4 seconds before anyone in the room knew the governor was going to be triggered. She had felt Ordle decide to say the word, and she had made her own heart stutter to trip the lock, and the lock had opened, and she was sitting up on the edge of the cradle in the flat white daylight with the conductive gel drying on her skin, small and dark and entirely calm, when the governor fired. Tuil watched 500 units of drowning static pour down the leash into the girl's new lattice. He watched it do nothing at all. She had already moved her attention somewhere the static wasn't. He would not understand how for a long time that a sense wide enough could simply root around a flood the way water roots around a stone, that she had felt the noise coming and set her perception outside its banks before it arrived. All Tuil saw in the moment was a prime surgeon holding a dead leash, and a human girl looking at the leash holder with something that was not anger and was not fear and was, if it was anything, a kind of patience. "That was the thing that was supposed to stop me," she said. "I felt you reach for it before you spoke. You should sit down, all of you. You've had a very big morning and it's about to get bigger, and I'd rather nobody did anything I have to answer." Daishi sat down. the oldest surgeon in the Meridian cadre, who had widened 40 species and buried the ones the procedure broke, folded herself down onto the gallery step in the white daylight, because a 20-year-old salvage hand with drying gel in her hair had told her to, and because every instrument in the bay agreed that the salvage hand could see the inside of her intentions more clearly than she could see them herself. Vess Ordle did not sit down. "You are property of the Meridian Institute," he said, "under conquered salvage law, bonded and lawful, and the augmentation in your cortex is cadre technology that does not leave this station in a living skull. Whatever you believe you can do." "I don't believe anything," Juno said. "That's the part you keep getting wrong." "Believing is what you do when you can't see. I can see." She stood off the cradle. Her bare feet touched the cold floor and she did not flinch. "You've got 4 people moving toward the bay doors from 3 directions to lock me in. Sethun's already been signaled, your overseer. He's coming up from the administrative ring, and he's deciding right now on the way whether it's cheaper to study me or delete me. He hasn't decided yet. That's good. That means we have time to talk before anyone does something we all regret." She looked around the bright, clean, ruined, quiet bay, at 40 of the finest sensory surgeons in the Concord, and at the blue world turning in the dome above them, and she said it without heat, the way a person reads a weather report. "I know you didn't expect this." "Neither did I, but you opened it, and it's open now, and I'd like to walk off this station alive. Let's find out if that's something you can let happen." Overseer Mal Sethun arrived through the bay's main iris 11 minutes later with 4 compliance drones, and a decision already half made. He was a large Sethvani, gone soft in the way administrators went soft, his 4 arms ringed with the copper bands of his office, his reading eyes filmed over with the particular calm of a man who had spent 30 years making problems disappear into paperwork. He had read the bay's emergency flag on the way up. He had read Ordle's summary, which was 3 lines long, and used the word irregular twice, and Mal Sethun knew that when Vess Ordle used the word irregular, the reality was a catastrophe. He stepped into the flat white daylight, took in the sitting gallery, the standing prime, the dead leash in the prime's hand, and the small human standing barefoot in the center of it all, and he began composing the report that would keep his position intact. "She's already writing it with you," Juno said. Sethun stopped. "The report. You're 2 sentences in. It's the one where the augmentation exceeded projected parameters and the asset was contained pending review, and contained is doing a lot of work in that sentence because you don't mean contained. You mean the other thing. You're just not going to write the other word down." The overseer looked at Ordle. "You told her the containment protocol." "I told her nothing," Ordle said. "She reads it off us." "She has been reading it off us for 11 minutes. She read your arrival before the drones were assigned. She read the governor before I triggered it." A pause. "The governor did not take." Sethun's 4 eyes moved slowly across the girl. "Explain, did not take." 500 units of suppression static," said old Daisy from the step where she still sat. "Poured straight into the lattice. She rooted her perception around it, the way you'd step out of the rain." "That's not possible." "No," Daisy agreed. "It isn't. And she did it anyway, and she did it before he spoke the word because she felt him decide." For a long moment the overseer said nothing. The blue world turned in the dome. The daylight slid a hand's width across the floor. Somewhere in the station spin a coolant line ticked. Then Mal Sethun made the decision he had been carrying up in the lift, and the instant he made it, the human's eyes came to him and stayed, and he understood with a cold crawl up all 4 of his shoulders that she had felt him make it. "You've chosen delete," Juno said quietly. "You just decided. A half-second ago. You're going to be very polite about it now. You'll offer me a room, a meal, a conversation about my future. And while you're being polite, the drones are going to circle to my flanks and someone's going to open a suppression field in the floor grid. And when I'm down, you're going to open my skull and take the lattice back. And the report will say the asset expired under anesthetic during recovery surgery. That's the plan you walked in with. She said all of it without raising her voice, without a flicker, the way she might have read a list of parts off a salvage manifest. It's a good plan. It would work on anyone you've ever done it to. It won't work on me, and I'd like to explain why before you try it, because if you try it, some of you are going to get hurt, and I don't want that, and this is the part you won't believe, neither do you. You're a coward, overseer. Cowards don't like blood in the room. You like it 3 decks away, with your name off the order. Nobody moved. Tuil Sarat, standing at his instrument bank, watched the most powerful man on the station stand perfectly still, while a barefoot girl narrated his own intentions back to him with more accuracy than he could have managed himself. And Tuil thought with a clarity that frightened him. She isn't guessing. Every subject the cadre had ever widened had guessed, had bluffed, had begged and threatened and bargained in the dark. This one wasn't in the dark. The widening had put her in a room where the lights were on and everyone else was blind, and she was simply reading what was written on all their faces at once. Suppose, Sethune said, choosing his words now with great care, that I did not want blood in the room. Then take the drones out. The drones stay. Then you do want blood in the room. You just want it to be mine. Juno tilted her head. See, that's the thing about not being able to lie to me. You'll find out what you actually mean about a second before you would have found out on your own. It's going to be a hard afternoon for everyone's self-image. A sound came from the gallery. It took Tuil a moment to place it, because he had never heard it in this bay. It was old Daishi, and she was laughing, a low, dry, involuntary rattle, the laugh of someone who has spent a lifetime being the smartest person in every room and has just met the exception. Prime, Daishi said when the rattle subsided, do you understand what we've made? We've made an instrument, Ordal said, that has slipped its calibration. We've made a mirror, said Daishi, that looks back, and you want to put your hand inside it. Sethune had heard enough philosophy. He was an administrator, he dealt in outcomes. Human, he said. Juno Hale, you are correct that I would prefer this handled cleanly, so let us be clean. You will be moved to a secure medical suite. You will be comfortable. In time, when tempers have cooled, we will discuss your status. The Institute has no interest in harming a subject of your value. 2 of those sentences are true, Juno said. The comfortable one and the value one. The rest is the polite plan. The drones just got their move order. I felt it go out through you. You blinked when you sent it, and it's a flanken drop, exactly like I said. So, she exhaled. I'm going to do something now, and I want everyone to watch because I'd rather show you once than have to keep showing you. Nobody panic. It's just going to look strange. The 4 compliance drones broke formation. 2 swung wide to her left, 2 to her right, smooth and silent on their repulsors, the classic pincer that had put down augmented subjects of a dozen species. At the same moment, the floor grid under her feet lit with the pale shimmer of a rising suppression field, keyed to drop her nervous system into static. Juno Hale took 1 step to the side. It was not a fast step. That was what Tuil could never make anyone understand afterward, retelling it. It was not fast. It was early. She stepped out of the square of floor that was about to light up a full breath before it lit, into the one square the field's geometry couldn't cover, and she did it so calmly that the drones, tracking where she had been, fired their soft restraint mesh into empty air and each other. 2 of them tangled. 1 overcorrected into the cradle and cracked its housing. The 4th pulled up, confused, its simple mind unable to find the target its sensors swore had been there a quarter second ago. The suppression field bloomed in the floor where she had been standing, and caught nothing, and faded. Juno was 3 steps away, near the instrument bank near Tuil, and she had not touched a single thing. That's all it is, she said into the silence. I don't hit harder than you. I'm not stronger. I'm slower than your drones and weaker than your smallest surgeon, and I've got no weapon and no house and no way off this station that I know of yet. All I've got is that I felt every one of those moves the second you decided to make them, and I moved first. That's the whole trick. That's the entire thing you built." She looked at Ordle, and for the first time something crossed her face that might have been the ghost of feeling. "You wanted to find the ceiling. This is the ceiling. It's a person who can't be surprised. I don't think you thought about what that would mean when you handed it to someone who didn't want to die." Mal Sethune stood among his tangled drones in the white daylight and performed the only calculation his office had ever really required of him, which was the calculation of cost. Studying her was expensive and dangerous. Deleting her was, he had just watched, apparently impossible by any method she could see coming, which was every method he had. But there was a third column in the ledger, one the cadre did not like to write down, and Mal Sethune had built his career in that third column. "Subsurgeon Sarat," he said. Tuil went rigid. "Overseer." "You laid the last of her lattice. You know its architecture better than anyone in this bay except the Prime." Sethune's filmed eyes did not leave the girl. "Is there any input, any at all, that she cannot root around? Any signal so total it fills every channel at once, leaves no clean water to step into?" And there it was. Tuil felt the question land in his chest like a cold stone, because he knew the answer, and he knew that the girl had felt the overseer form the question before it reached his ear, and he knew, looking at her now, at her small still face turned toward him, that she was waiting to see what he would do with it. "There is," Tuil said slowly, "in theory." "Tuil," said old Dashi, a warning. "A full spectrum cascade through the lattice's own carrier line," Tuil went on, hating the sound of his own voice, unable to stop it because a subsurgeon does not refuse an overseer and go on being a subsurgeon. "You wouldn't fight her senses. You'd overload the lattice itself from the inside through the port we use to tune it, every channel maximum at once, no clean water, nowhere to step. And that would put her down. That would put anything down. It would put a star down." Tuil's hands had begun to shake again. "Overseer, it would also very likely burn the lattice out. You'd lose the augmentation. You'd lose the thing you're trying to keep. And he made himself say it, she might not come back up at all." Sethune considered this for exactly as long as it took to decide that a dead marvel he could dissect was worth more than a living marvel he could not hold. "Prepare the cascade," he said. And Juno Hale, who had heard every word, who had felt the overseer choose before the choosing finished, looked at Tuil Sarat with no anger in her at all, and said, very quietly, so that only he could hear it under the rising hum of the drones, "Don't run it while I'm in the room. That's all I'll ask you. Whatever else you do, don't run it while I'm in the room." Then she turned, and she walked toward the bay doors, and the whole terrified apparatus of the Meridian Institute turned to stop her. The bay doors did not open for her. Sethune had locked the station the moment he stepped off the lift. Every iris, every lift, every pressure door on the medical ring keyed to his authority and his alone, because that was the first thing a careful administrator did with a loose asset. Juno Hale walked up to the main iris, and it stayed shut, and she stopped in front of it with her hands at her sides. "I know," she said, to no one or to the door. "I'm not going through you. You'd never let me, and I'd have to hurt the 2 guards standing on the far side, and one of them has a family rotation coming up. I can feel him thinking about it." She turned her head slowly, and Tuil watched her do the thing she would do 100 times over the hours that followed, the thing that made the hair stand up on the back of every neck in the Concord that later heard of it. She read the station the way a person reads a room. She could not see through walls. Tuil was certain of that. Then and after, the lattice widened perception. It did not rewrite physics, but perception, widened far enough, catches the edges of everything. The vibration of a lift car 3 decks down carried up the structural spine to the soles of her bare feet. The change in air pressure when a distant door cycled reached her before the sound did. The faint electrical wash of 40 surgeons' anxiety, the drone's repulsor hum, the coolant tick, the deep slow groan of the station's spin, all of it poured into a nervous system built by 4 billion years of a world that killed anything which stopped paying attention, and now built wider than any world had ever needed. She stood in the middle of it and she listened, and the station gave up its shape to her the way a dark room gives up its furniture to a hand held out. "There's a service corridor behind the reference archive," she said. "It runs to the coolant gallery, and the coolant gallery has a maintenance iris that answers to the environmental system, not to you, overseer, because you never thought to lock the pipes. From the coolant gallery I can reach the transit spoke. From the transit spoke I can reach a lifeboat. That's my route. I'm telling you so you understand I'm not trapped, and so you understand that everything you do to stop me between here and there is a choice, not a necessity." "Seal the coolant gallery," Sethune said to the air. "You just told the environmental system to seal it," Juno said. "It's confirming the order now. It'll take 90 seconds. The pipes are on a slow bus. I'll be through before it finishes. But thank you for confirming the route was real. I wasn't certain until you tried to close it." Mal Sethune had negotiated with 100 desperate assets across 30 years, and he had never in his life felt the particular helplessness of an opponent who learned the truth of his own defenses from watching him defend them. Every move he made told her the shape of the board. Every order he gave, she read on the way out of his mouth. He was, he realized, not playing against her. He was playing against himself, out loud in front of her and losing. "Run the cascade," he said. The words came out flat and fast, the way a man says a thing before he can think better of it. Across the bay, Tuel's hands froze over the tuning port. Juno did not turn around. She had gone very still at the door, and Tuel saw her shoulders drop a fraction, the first thing that looked like weariness he had seen from her. "I asked you not to run it while I was in the room," she said quietly. "I'm still in the room." "Subsurgeon Sarat," Sethune said, "run the cascade." Tuel Sarat looked at the tuning port. He looked at the girl's back. He looked at old Daishi, still sitting on the gallery step, watching him with 3 of her 4 eyes. The 4th closed the way a Sethvani closed one eye when she wanted a younger surgeon to understand that a line was in front of him, and he was about to cross it. He thought about the architecture he had laid with his own 2 working hands. He thought about the number that had run out of species. He thought about the girl saying you'd have felt sick either way, and how she had been right, and how nobody had ever been right about him that fast in his life. "No," Tuel said. The bay went silent in a new way. "Subsurgeon." "The cascade will burn the lattice," Tuel said, and his voice, to his own surprise, had stopped shaking. "You'll destroy the only complete widening at maximum ever performed. The data alone is worth more than this station. If you run the cascade, you're deleting the result and the subject in the same stroke, and the conquered ethics board that you went around to authorize this procedure will have all of it, the going around, the maximum, the termination order, because the bay logs everything, overseer, including you saying run the cascade 4 times in 6 minutes. Tuel lifted his 2 working hands off the port and folded all 4 arms against his chest, the surgeon's posture of a man who has decided to be calm. "I'm not going to be the hand on that order. Find another." For a moment Mal Sethune's composure cracked, and Tuel saw underneath it the thing the girl had named, the coward who wanted his blood 3 decks away with his name off it. "Ordle," Sethune said, "your subsurgeon has refused a lawful order." "I heard," Ordle said. "Run the cascade." And Ves Ordle, prime surgeon of the Meridian Cadre, the man who had spent his life arguing that there was no ceiling and had just been proven right at a cost he had not counted, looked at the girl standing barefoot at his sealed door and looked at the tuning port, and Tuel realized with a lurch that Ordle had not folded his hands, that Ordle's 2 free hands had drifted, almost idle, toward the port. Prime, Daisy said, standing now off the step. If you touch that port, you are not a surgeon anymore, you're his knife. She pointed one long arm at Sethune without looking at him. We took an oath about ceilings. We said the reason we chase them is to know, not to own. You wanted to know where the top was. You found it. It's standing at the door asking to leave alive. If you burn it down because a frightened administrator told you to, then everything you ever said about knowing was a lie, and I'll spend what's left of my life saying so. She rooted the governor, Ordle said very quietly, and his free hands had not stopped moving toward the port. She stepped out of the field. She reads us like a chart. Daisy, you saw it. If she reaches a lifeboat, she takes the lattice into the Concord, into the Frontier, into the Bond Cruise, into every hold that ever hated us, and she teaches them what she is. One of her is a wonder. 10,000 of her is the end of everything we've built. I am not burning down a subject. I am closing a door before the whole galaxy learns what's on the other side of it. She's 20, Daisy said. She's a salvage hand. She wants to go home. She's the most dangerous thing in the catalog, Ordle said, and I made her, and I am the only one who understands exactly how much. His hands reached the port. Ordle, Juno said. She had turned around. She stood at the sealed iris with the flat white daylight of the turning world falling across her, small and dirt-flecked and unarmed. And she looked at the prime surgeon with the tired patience of a person who has watched this coming from a long way off and hoped, all the way, that it would turn aside. I felt you decide before you decided, she said. You've been deciding for 4 minutes. It's the only thing in this room I couldn't read clean, because you kept telling yourself you wouldn't, right up until you would. That's the closest anyone's come to hiding from me since you switched me on. A breath. I'm going to tell you what happens if you run it, and then you're going to choose, and I'm not going to stop you, because I can't reach the port before your hand does, and I'm not going to hurt everyone between me and you to try. So, here it is. The bay held still. Even the drones had gone quiet. You run the cascade. It fills every channel. For about a second and a half I feel everything at once, the whole station, the whole spectrum, all of it screaming, and it burns the lattice out, and probably it burns me out with it, exactly like your subsurgeon said. You get your dead marvel. You get to dissect the ceiling. Juno's voice did not change. And Daisy records all of it, and Saret backs the log to the Concord relay. And the ethics board you dodged learns that you took a bonded frontier kid, widened her past every law you have, and burned her alive at maximum on an overseer's word when she was walking to a lifeboat asking to go home. You won't be a prime after that. You won't be anything. Sethune will put your name on the order and his own 3 decks away, exactly like she said, and you'll have thrown your whole life into the fire to kill a girl who never once raised a hand to you. She paused. Or you take your hands off the port, and you let me walk to the coolant gallery, and you spend the rest of your life as the man who found the ceiling and had the sense not to break it. I can't make you choose. I can only tell you I already know which one you are, and I'm sorry it's this hard for you to know it too. Ves Ordle stood with his 2 free hands on the tuning port of the greatest thing he had ever built. The daylight moved. The world turned in the dome. Prime, Sethune said softly, greedily, run it. Ordle ran it. Tuil had expected a sound. There was none. The cascade was a thing that happened inside the lattice, on the carrier line, in the fine dark architecture no eye could follow, and so from the outside it looked like almost nothing at all. The tuning port's indicator flushed from amber to white, the way it did during any deep tune, and across the bay the girl went down. She did not writhe. That was the second thing Tuil could never make anyone understand. Every subject the cadre had ever brought to the floor with a suppression pulse had fought it, had arched and clawed and screamed at the flood, because the mind, drowning, fights. Juno Hale folded to her knees at the sealed iris and then over onto her side and lay still, one hand loose against the cold floor, and she did not fight the flood at all. She had, Tuil understood later, much later, turning it over in the long quiet after, done the opposite of fighting. She had felt the cascade coming for 4 minutes. She had felt the exact half-second Ordal's hand would move. And in that half-second she had done the one thing the cadre's entire model of the procedure said was impossible, because the cadre had only ever studied minds that clung to the flood and were drowned by it. She had let go. She had pulled her whole attention down out of the wide, screaming, widened world and back into the small dark room of the 5 senses a human is born with, the narrow human baseline, blind and deaf and dull, and she had shut the door, and the cascade had poured its full spectrum into an architecture with no one home, and burned through empty rooms. The lattice took it. The lattice was built to carry signal, and the cascade was signal past all reckoning, and it ran through every channel at maximum with nothing to receive it and nowhere to stop, and it burned. The tuning port's indicator went from white to red to dark. Lattice carrier failed, Tuil read off his own bank, his voice hollow. Full spectrum burnout, the augmentation is, he swallowed, it's gone. Most of it, she's dropped from 500 to, the number crawled, settling to 60. 60, that's below the Ilu, that's barely above a conquered baseline. And the subject, Sethun's voice was tight. Tuil looked at the girl on the floor. Her chest rose, fell, rose. Alive, he said. She's alive. She let it burn through her instead of fighting it, and it burned the lattice out, and it didn't kill her because, he laughed, a cracked and helpless sound, because there was nobody standing in the fire when it came through. She wasn't there. She'd stepped back into her own head and locked it and waited it out in the dark. He turned on Sethun, and something in him that had been bowing his whole career straightened all the way up. You didn't kill her, Overseer. You did worse than that for your purposes. You burned out the only complete maximum widening in cadre history, the result, the data, the proof of the ceiling, to catch a girl who was walking to a lifeboat, and she survived it anyway, and now you've got neither. You've got an ordinary human on the floor and a burned instrument and a bay full of witnesses. That's what your order bought. Ves Ordal took his 2 hands off the port very slowly. He looked at them as though they belonged to someone else. Then he looked at the girl, small and dark and breathing on the floor of his bay. No longer a marvel, no longer the ceiling, just a human being who had chosen to throw away the greatest gift his science had ever produced rather than let him own her with it. And something went out of the prime surgeon's face that Tuil had never seen leave it before, and never saw return. Log, Daisy said, into the air, and her voice was iron. Bay log, sealed to conquered ethics relay, priority medical legal, do not overwrite. Record as follows. This bay performed a maximum widening on a bonded frontier human without ethics board authorization. When the subject requested repatriation, Overseer Mal Sethun ordered her termination 4 times. Prime Surgeon Ves Ordal executed a full-spectrum carrier cascade with intent to terminate. The subject survived by voluntarily severing her own augmented perception at the cost of the augmentation itself. Witnessed by Senior Surgeon Dashi Oren. Witnessed by Subsurgeon Tuil Sarat. Sealed. Belay that, Sethun snapped. Overseer authority, belay and purge. You don't have log authority over a sealed medical legal record, Dashi said, almost pleasantly. The one law you people wrote that you can't reach around. Funny, isn't it, Mal? You locked every door on the ring. You never thought to lock the truth. On the floor, Juno Hale opened her eyes. They were different. Tuil saw it from across the bay. The terrible bright attention was gone out of them, banked down to something human-sized. A young woman waking on a cold floor with a headache the size of a station. She lay still a moment, taking the measure of a world that had gone quiet and narrow and dull, and Tuil watched her understand what she had spent to stay alive, and watched her decide it had been worth it. It's quiet, she said. Her voice was rough. First time it's been quiet since you switched me on. I'd forgotten what it was like to only hear the things that make a sound. Juno. Tuil crossed the bay before he had decided to, and knelt and did not touch her, because you did not touch a predator without leave even when the predator was flat on a floor. Can you? How much is left? Your bank says 60, above baseline, still above every. I know how much is left. She pushed up onto an elbow, and there was gel-dried gray in her hair and a bruise coming up on her cheekbone where she'd gone down. Enough, not the flood. The flood's gone. I couldn't have lived in the flood anyway, nobody could. It was going to burn me out on its own inside a month, whether he ran the cascade or not. He just did it faster and on purpose. She looked up at Ordle, past Tuil's shoulder. You built a thing that couldn't last, Prime. The ceiling you were chasing, it wasn't a place a person could stand. I was always going to have to come back down. I just wanted to do it on a lifeboat on my own terms, not on your table. A pause. What's left is enough to still feel you. All of you. Not the whole spectrum, just the important part. The part that tells me what a room is about to do. Her eyes moved to Sethune and hardened. So don't get ideas because the big number went away. The number that keeps you honest is still on. Mal Sethune had gone the gray of a man, watching his ledger balance the wrong way. He had spent the last hour learning that he could not surprise her, could not outplan her, could not outorder her. And now he had learned that even destroying her had failed, had cost him everything and bought him nothing, and had been recorded, sealed, sent. There was, in the Overseer's long, careful experience, exactly one move left when every clean move was gone. And it was the move he liked least and used most, the one that lived in the third column of the ledger, and he reached for it now the way a drowning man reaches for the thing that will finish him. Sethune's calling the station's enforcement caste, Juno said, from the floor, wiping grit from her cheek. The real ones, not drones. He's about to declare a hull breach in the medical ring so they come armed and come fast and don't ask questions when they find a loose human standing over a downed Prime. He's going to make it look like I did all this. She got a knee under herself. That's the move. Frame the survivor. It's a good move. It might even work. There's a lot of you and one of me, and I can't read a whole squad of armored enforcers as clean as I can read one frightened man in a quiet room. She stood, swaying, one hand on the cold iris frame. But here's the thing, Overseer. You just decided to do it, and I felt you decide. Which means I've got about 3 minutes before they get here, and I know exactly which corridor they'll come down, and you've just given me a reason to be somewhere else. She looked at Tuil. She looked at old Daishi. You two logged the truth, she said. That was brave, and it'll cost you, and I won't forget it. But a sealed log 3 decks away doesn't help me get past a breach squad in the next 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask one more time, and then I'm going to go, whatever you say. A breath. The coolant gallery. The maintenance iris that answers to environmental, not to him. Is it still open, or did his seal beat me to it? Tuil Sarat looked at the burned port, and the sealed log, and the gray-faced Overseer already whispering a false breach into the station's throat, and he made the second decision of the day that ended the career he'd thought he was going to have. It's open, he said. The seal's stuck on the slow bus, you were right about that, but you won't reach it from here. He's locked the archive corridor between this bay and the gallery. He stood. I know a way around it, through the tuning lab crawlspace. I've been going that way to skip the checkpoint since I was a candidate. He held out one of his 4 hands, the surgeon's hand, the one that had laid her lattice. I'll take you as far as the gallery. After that you're on your own, and I never saw you, and neither did anyone. Juno Hale looked at the offered hand for a moment. You'll be sick again on the way, she said. Nerves. It's fine. I won't hold it against you. And she took the hand and let the young surgeon pull her upright, and the two of them went out through the tuning lab door as the first false alarm began to sound through the bright bones of the station. The crawlspace behind the tuning lab was never built for 2, and Tuil went first because he knew the turns, and the human came behind him in the dark, and she was faster in the dark than he was. That should not have been so. Tuil had 4 arms for the ladders and a lifetime of using this crawlspace to dodge the candidate checkpoint. Juno Hale had 2 arms, a burned lattice, a bruised face, and 60 units of perception where an hour ago she'd had 500. But she never reached for a rung that wasn't there, never barked a shin, never hesitated at a junction. She read the air currents where the shafts branched. She felt the vibration of the ladders before her hands found them. In the pitch black of a ScienceFiction maintenance shaft, sealed against light, she moved like a person walking her own home at night. And Tuil, sweating, banging one elbow, breathing hard, moved like the alien in her house. "Left here," he panted. "The vertical run drops to the archive under deck. From there." "Someone's in the vertical run," Juno said. "Coming up, 1 person. Enforcement, I can feel the armor plates, they ring different when they move. He's checking the shafts because someone smart on Sethun's staff guessed I'd use them." A pause in the dark. "Keep going left. Don't stop. When we reach the junction, he'll be at the bottom of the drop looking up, and he'll have a launcher up before he sees us because he's scared, and scared enforcers shoot first. I'll handle it. Don't touch him. And Sarat, when it happens, don't freeze. Just keep moving to the drop. Trust that I've already read it." Tuil did not answer. His mouth had gone dry. He had spent his career among people who planned. He had never in his life followed someone who already knew. They reached the junction. Below them, the vertical run fell away into deeper dark, and out of that dark came the sound Juno had promised a full breath before Tuil heard it. The ring of armored plates, a body climbing, and then the whine of a restraint launcher spinning up. The enforcer came into view at the bottom of the drop, a squat armored shape with 4 arms and a launcher braced across 2 of them, and his helm light swept up the shaft and found them. And his launcher was already up, already aimed, already firing. Juno was not where the launcher was aimed. She had moved before it fired. Tuil saw it and could not have said how. One instant she was beside him at the junction, square in the bore of the thing, and the next she had folded herself flat against the shaft wall in the one narrow lee. The launcher's arc couldn't sweep, and the restraint mesh screamed up the vertical run through the space where her chest had been and spent itself against the ceiling grate in a tangle of dead filament. The enforcer had 1 shot in the launcher. Enforcers always had 1 shot in a restraint launcher. It took 4 seconds to cycle another. Tuil knew that. The enforcer knew that. And Juno Hale, who had never held a launcher in her life, had known it too, had felt the single charge in the weapon the way she felt everything, and had spent his 1 shot on empty shaft on purpose, so that now, for 4 seconds, the armored man at the bottom of the drop had nothing. "He's got a sidearm on his left hip," Juno said, already moving down the ladder toward him, calm, unhurried. "He's thinking about it. He's deciding whether 4 seconds is enough to draw it. It isn't, and he knows it isn't. And in about 1 second he's going to decide to grab me instead, because he's twice my size and I'm coming right to him, and that feels safe." She reached the bottom of the drop. "It isn't safe, but I'm not going to hurt him, so it doesn't matter." The enforcer grabbed for her. He was fast and enormous, and his 4 arms closed on the space where the small human was, and she was not there. She had felt the grab form in his shoulders before it reached his hands, and she had already stepped inside it, under the reach of all 4 arms, close against the great armored chest where none of the arms could fold to hold her. And she did the only violent thing Tuil saw her do in the whole of that terrible day, and it was almost gentle. She reached up and found the manual pressure release at the collar of his armor, the emergency seal every enforcer wore so a wounded man could be cut out of his shell, and she popped it. The armor did what it was built to do. It shed. The hard shell went slack and heavy and slid off the enforcer's shoulders in a clatter of dead plates, and the man inside it, suddenly ordinary, suddenly soft, suddenly a frightened middle-caste ScienceFiction in a duty liner with no shell and no shot and a human standing inside his guard, froze. "There," Juno said. "Now you're just a person same as me. Sit down against the wall. You're not going to draw the sidearm because I felt you give up on it when the shell came off, and you're going to tell Sethun you never found me because that's true, you didn't, I found you." She stepped back, giving him room, giving him the dignity of not being crowded. You've got a rotation coming up, 6 days. You're thinking about it right now. Go home to it. Nobody up in that bay is worth dying for a man who'd put your name on his order, and his own 3 decks away. The enforcer sat down against the wall. He was a professional. He had faced augmented subjects before. He had put down a widened Moroth once and worn the commendation. And he sat down against the wall of a maintenance shaft and let a 60-unit human walk past him, because in the space of 8 seconds she had spent his shot, walked through his reach, stripped his shell, and offered him his life back, and had done all of it without landing a single blow, and there was nothing in his training for an enemy who didn't need to hit you because she was already standing where your hit was going to be. Sarat, Juno said over her shoulder, "Come on, you're green. Breathe through it." Tuil came down the ladder past the seated enforcer, and he was, in fact, fighting his stomach again, and he made it through the archive underdeck iris before it beat him. When he straightened, the girl was waiting, watching him with that banked, human-sized attention that was so much easier to stand under than the flood had been. "You keep saving them," he said. "The guards, the one with the family, now this one, you could have hurt any of them. It would have been faster." "Faster isn't the goal." Juno started down the underdeck corridor, reading the dark ahead of her, and Tuil fell in beside her. "The goal is to get to a lifeboat and go home and never see the inside of your institute again. If I hurt people on the way, then your prime was right about me. I'm the end of everything. 10,000 of me teaching the frontier how to gut you in the dark. If I don't, then I'm just a girl your overseer tried to kill, walking to a boat." She glanced at him. "That's the whole war, Sarat, not the launcher. That. Whether the thing you built goes home quiet or goes home teaching. I've been deciding which one to be since I woke up on your table, and I keep deciding quiet, and it keeps costing me, and I keep doing it anyway. You should tell your prime that someday. Tell him the ceiling had the chance to be the end of everything and chose not to be. See if it helps him sleep." Tuil walked beside her in the dark and understood, with the slow, cold horror that would reorganize the rest of his life, that Ordal had been exactly half right. The ceiling was as dangerous as he'd feared. Everything he'd feared was true. A human perception widened past every species, loose in the conquered, teaching the holds. It would be the end of everything the cadre had built, exactly as Ordal said. The only thing Ordal had gotten wrong was the human. He'd assumed that a predator, handed the power to be the end of everything, would want to be. And this one, walking barefoot through the underdeck with a burned lattice and a bruise on her face, kept looking at the power to end them all, and setting it down and choosing to go home instead, and that choice, Tuil realized, was the thing 4 billion years of a killing world had actually built. Not the senses. The restraint. The senses were just what the cadre had been able to see. "The gallery's ahead," Juno said. 2 turns. And Sarat, she stopped, and her banked attention sharpened, and for the first time since the bay Tuil saw something cross her face that looked like real concern. Sethyun stopped calling the enforcers off. He did something else instead, something quieter. "I can't read it clean from here. It's the wrong shape. It's not a person deciding. It's a machine already decided." She started moving again, faster now. "He's turning off the environmental system's independence. He's about to hand the coolant gallery to his own authority after all. If he finishes before we get there, the maintenance iris locks and my route home closes. And then there's only one boat left, and it's on the far side of the whole station through every corridor he owns." She broke into a run. "Move. We have to reach it before the pipes stop answering to anyone but him." They did not make the gallery clean. Halfway down the underdeck corridor, Juno stopped so hard that Tuil ran into her, and she pressed them both flat against a coolant stanchion, and she did not speak for a moment, which frightened Tuil more than any warning she'd given all day. "2 ahead," she breathed. "Not enforcement. Tech's environmental crew sent to physically seal the gallery iris by hand because Sethyun doesn't trust the slow bus to beat me. They're between us and the gallery, and they're armed light, and one of them is nervous enough to shoot at movement." She was reading hard now, her banked attention straining, and Tuil saw something he had not seen from her before: effort. In the bay, at 500 units, she had read 40 people without a flicker. Here, at 60, tired, 3 decks and 1 escape into the day, she was working for it, and the work showed. "I can't feel them as clean as I could this morning. It's like," she pressed the heel of her hand to her eye like reading in dim light, "I get the shapes. I lose the edges. This is what 60 units is. This is what he burned me down to." "Then we wait," Tuil whispered. "Let them seal it and find another." "There is no another. It's this gallery or the far side of the station." She breathed out. "I have to move them, and I can't do it the clean way because the clean way needs the edges, and I don't have the edges anymore. So I'm going to do it the rough way, and it's going to cost me, and I want you to be ready to run." She stepped out into the corridor. The 2 techs saw her at once, a small gray shape in the maintenance light, and the nervous one brought his tool cutter up, a short industrial thing not meant for people, and fired a burst of its clearing charge down the corridor. At 500 units, Juno would have been gone before his hand tensed. At 60, tired, reading in dim light, she felt it a fraction late, and she moved a fraction late, and the clearing charge caught her across the left shoulder instead of missing clean. It was not a killing hit. It was a glancing burn, a hard, bright line of pain across the meat of her shoulder that spun her half around and put her down on one knee against the corridor wall. Tuil heard her breath go out of her in a short, flat grunt, the first sound of pain she'd made all day, and his whole body went cold, because if she could be hit, then the thing he'd been following as though it were fate was only a tired young woman after all, and tired young women died in corridors. But she was already up. She came up off the knee inside the nervous tech's reload, close, the way she'd taken the enforcer's shell, and she did not have a weapon and did not take his, and instead she did the rough thing she'd promised. She put her uninjured shoulder into the coolant relief valve beside his head and cracked it open, and the corridor filled with a roaring white jet of vented coolant vapor, freezing, blinding, harmless in a short burst but total, and the 2 techs recoiled from it on instinct, throwing their arms up, backing away from the roar toward the gallery mouth, exactly where she needed them not to be standing. "Go," she said to Tuil through her teeth, one hand clamped to her burned shoulder. "Through the vapor, they can't see and I can't be read, but neither can I. We're all blind now. That's the point. I made us all even, and even is the best I can do at 60. And she shoved him ahead of her into the roaring white, and they went through it together, past the coughing, blinded techs, out the far side of the vapor into the last stretch of corridor before the gallery, and behind them the 2 techs stumbled the wrong way. Into the vapor instead of after them, because a blinded person moves away from the roar, and the roar was between them and their quarry. Juno leaned on the wall a moment, breathing hard, her left sleeve dark and wet, her face gray. "That's what it costs now," she said. "This morning I'd have walked between them without either one knowing I was there. Now I take a burn and vent a corridor and get lucky that scared men run from a noise." She pushed off the wall. "I want you to remember this part too, Sarah, when you tell it. Not just the bay where I couldn't lose. This part, where I could. Where I got hit and it hurt, and I did a clumsy, desperate thing and it barely worked." She started down the corridor toward the gallery, cradling the arm. "Because the version where I can't be touched, that's the version your prime was afraid of, the invincible thing loose in the conquered. This is the real one. A girl who can be burned, who gets tired, who bleeds in a corridor, and who keeps walking to the boat anyway. That one's not the end of everything. That one just wants to go home. Tell them that one. It's the true one, and it's the only one worth telling." They reached the coolant gallery with the maintenance iris still open, and it was closing. Not fast. The heavy-pressure iris of a coolant gallery closed the way everything on the slow environmental bus moved, with a groan and a grind, pedals folding in from the rim, a hand's width at a time. When Juno came around the last turn into the gallery's white daylight, the gallery had a viewport, and the blue world was under it, and the flat light came in and lay across the great sweating pipes. The iris on the far side was 2/3 shut and folding. "Sethune won the race for the bus," she said. She did not slow. "He handed the pipes to his own authority 30 seconds ago, and the iris got the close order. It's finishing now. We're not going to beat it running." She was already reading the gallery, her banked attention sweeping the pipes, the gratings, the great slow machinery of the station's breath. But he handed it his authority through the environmental controller, and the environmental controller is right there, and it's still got a manual override for exactly this, for a maintenance tech caught on the wrong side of a closing iris. Because the one thing the people who built this station cared about more than security was not crushing a worker in a door. She reached the controller housing. "Sethune never overrode the safety. He never thinks about the workers. Sarat, your hands." "The manual release is a 4-point. It's built for your grip, not mine. Second panel down, both middle arms, now." Tuil got both middle arms into the release and pulled. The iris shuddered, caught, and began, grinding to fold back open. "Halfway," Juno said. "That's all we get, the close orders fighting your release. It'll settle at half." "Enough. Go through, don't stop. The transit spoke is the long tube on the far side, and the lifeboat cradles are at the end of it." She pushed Tuil through the half-open iris ahead of her, into the spoke, and came through after, and behind them the iris ground to its confused halt, jammed half-open between 2 orders, and the white daylight of the gallery narrowed to a slot and was gone. The transit spoke ran 100 meters of curved tube out toward the station's rim, lined with viewports, and the blue world wheeled slowly past all of them, and it was the brightest place on the whole station, flooded with the flat, clean light of a world turning under noon. Juno ran through it barefoot with the surgeon panting behind her, and at the far end the lifeboat cradles waited, 6 blunt escape craft in their berths, and she felt, before she reached them, that she was not going to be allowed to simply climb into one and go. "He's ahead of us," she said, slowing. "Not Sethune. Someone Sethune sent faster than us up the rim corridor while we were in the pipes. One person, waiting at the cradles. Not enforcement, the plates ring wrong, lighter, it's not armor, it's—" She stopped. "It's the Prime, it's Ordle, he's at the lifeboats, he came himself." Tuil skidded to a halt beside her. "That's not possible, he was in the bay, he'd have to have." "And," Juno said, "the whole way around the rim while we went through the middle. He's not fast, but he had a straight line and a reason." She stood in the bright spoke, breathing hard, reading the man waiting at the end of it. "He's not armed, he's not calling enforcement, he's just standing at the boats, waiting for me." Her banked attention worked at him, and Tuil watched her frown, because this was the man she'd said she couldn't read clean, the one who'd hidden his decision behind telling himself he wouldn't. "I don't know what he wants, that's twice now. He's the only thing on this station I can't see the inside of. Stay behind me, Sarat." She walked the last of the spokes slowly, into the light, toward the prime surgeon standing between her and the boats. Behind her, 3 decks up in the bay she'd left, the fight she couldn't see was already deciding whether her escape would mean anything at all. Old Dashi Oren stood over the sealed log terminal with all 4 arms spread across it, and Overseer Mal Sethune stood on the other side of it with 2 compliance drones and the station's records clerk, a nervous slate-gray functionary named Paul who had never in his career been asked to do anything that could end it. "The record is sealed to the Concord Relay," Dashi said for the 3rd time. "Medical legal priority, you cannot purge it. That is the one law you cannot reach around, Mal, and you know it, because you helped write the exception the year you wanted a Prime's mistake buried and found you couldn't." "The relay hasn't sent yet," Sethune said. "Station's in a declared breach state. All outbound traffic holds until the breach clears. The record is sealed, yes. It is also sitting in the station's own buffer, going nowhere until I clear the breach, and I will not be clearing the breach until this buffer is empty." He turned to the clerk. "Paul, under Overseer Emergency Authority, purge the medical buffer, all of it. The breach corrupted it, that's the finding. Sign it." Paul the clerk looked at the terminal, and at Daishi's four spread arms, and at the overseer and at the drones. Senior Surgeon Oren is correct that the record is medical legal sealed, Paul said, very quietly. Purging a sealed medical legal record is a capital offense under Concord law, overseer, for the officer who signs it. The breach corrupted it. You're not purging a record, you're clearing corrupted data. There's a difference, and the difference is my authority, and I am giving you my authority in writing. Sethun's copper-banded arms did not shake, but his voice had climbed. Sign it, Paul, or I'll find the finding that the breach was your negligence, and you'll answer for the whole day instead of none of it. And Paul, the records clerk, who had spent 30 years being nobody, being safe, being 3 decks away from everything, looked down the length of that threat and understood that for the first time in his career there was no safe place to stand, that the overseer had backed him into the one corner where doing nothing was as fatal as doing wrong. And he began, with trembling fingers, to enter his authority into the terminal to purge the only proof that a girl had been burned alive for asking to go home. Paul, Daishi said, "Look at me." The clerk looked at her. "I am 91 years old," Daishi said. "I have widened 40 species, and I have buried the ones it broke, and I have signed more findings than you have read. I have never once in all of it refused a prime or an overseer, because I told myself the work was worth the silence. I told myself that for 70 years. Her old reading eyes held the clerk's. And today, I watched a child throw away the greatest gift my science ever made, rather than use it to become the monster we assumed she'd be. She had the power to end all of us, Paul." She kept setting it down. A 20-year-old salvage hand with more restraint than every senior surgeon in this cadre put together. And I am not going to stand here and watch a frightened clerk erase her for the crime of surviving, because if I do, then she was the only person in this whole bright station worth anything, and the rest of us were furniture. Daishi did not raise her voice. "You want a safe place to stand. There isn't one. There's only the record you help erase and the record you help keep. Choose which one you want your name on, because your name's going on one of them today no matter what you do." Paul, the clerk's fingers stopped over the terminal. "The buffer holds until the breach clears," he said slowly, to no one, as if working it out. "And the breach was declared by overseer authority. And a false breach declaration is itself a medical legal event." He looked up, and something had settled in his slate-gray face, some small terrible calm. "I can't purge a sealed record, overseer, but I can log a second one. I can log that the breach was declared with no breach present by your authority at the moment a subject requested repatriation, and I can seal that too, and then there'll be 2 records you can't reach around instead of 1. His fingers moved. "I'm sorry. You're right that there's no safe place. This is the one I choose." Mal Sethun stared at the clerk who had been nobody for 30 years, and understood that he had, in his own panic, done to Paul exactly what he'd tried to do to the human, cornered a quiet thing until it had nothing left to lose, and that quiet things with nothing left to lose do not break the way frightened things do. They set their feet. "Drones," Sethun said thickly, "take the clerk off the terminal." "You do that," Daishi said, "and you've assaulted a records officer in the act of sealing a medical legal finding, in a bay that logs everything, and you've made a 3rd record. How many do you want, Mal? I'll stand here and make them with you all afternoon. I'm 91. I've got nothing but afternoons left, and I've finally found one worth spending." Ves Ordal watched the human come up the spoke toward him, and did not know what he was going to do. That was the truth of it. The truth he had carried in a straight run around the whole rim of the station while his hearts hammered and his old lungs burned. He did not know. He had left the bay at a dead run the moment she went into the crawlspace, and he had told himself, running, that he was going to stop her, that he was the only one who understood the stakes, that a prime did not let the end of everything walk onto a lifeboat and fly it home to the holds. And he had told himself at the same time, in the same breath, that he was going to help her, that he had run the cascade and it had cost her everything, and the least he owed the ruin of his own greatest work was a clear path to a boat. He had run the whole rim holding both of those and had arrived holding both, and he stood now between the girl and the cradles with two of his hands loose at his sides and two folded against his chest, and did not know which pair was going to move. That, he understood, was why she couldn't read him. He had seen it on her face in the bay, and again now, the small frown, the sharpening attention that found nothing to catch on. She read intent. She read the shape of a decision forming. And Ves Ordal had spent 60 years as a surgeon learning to keep his hands still, and his mind empty until the moment of the cut, to not decide, to let the decision live in the hands and arrive only when they moved, because a surgeon who decides too early cuts wrong. He had made himself, over a lifetime, into the one thing in the galaxy her new senses couldn't parse, a man whose intent did not exist until his hands enacted it. "You came the long way," Juno said. She had stopped a few meters off, the surgeon Sarret behind her, the blue world wheeling in the viewports. "All the way around the rim. That's a long run for a man your age. You wanted to be here before me. Now you're here and you don't know why." Her banked attention worked at him and slid off. "I can't feel your decision, Prime. You're the only one. That should frighten me. It doesn't quite, and I can't tell you why either." "Because you know I'm not going to hurt you," Ordal said. "No, I don't know that. That's the whole point. I don't know anything about you. You're a blank wall. You could be about to do anything." She tilted her head. "I think it doesn't frighten me because a man who wanted me dead wouldn't have run around the whole station to stand in front of me unarmed. You'd have told the boats to lock and gone back to your bay. You did something slower and harder, and I don't think you know what it was for. So, here we both are. Tell me what you want, Prime, before your overseer decides for both of us." Ordal looked at her, small, gray with dried gel, bruised, 60 units where he had built 500, the ruin of the greatest thing his science had ever made, and heard himself say the thing that had been under all the others the whole run around the rim. "I want to know if I was wrong." The girl went still. "Not about the ceiling," Ordal said. "I was right about the ceiling. There is no ceiling. You proved it. And not about the danger. I was right about the danger too. Wasn't I a perception like the one I gave you, loose in the Concord, taught to the holds and the bond crews and every world that ever hated the cadre? That is the end of us. Of everything we built. I've spent an hour watching you root my governor and step out of my field and read my overseer's cowardice off his face, and I know exactly what 10,000 of you would do to the order I've served my whole life. I was right about all of it." His folded hands did not move. His loose hands did not move. "I was wrong about one thing. I assumed that a thing which could end us all would want to. I built the danger, and I never once thought about the restraint, because in all my catalog, there has never been a predator that held a weapon like that and chose not to use it. I looked at 4 billion years of your killing world, and I saw only the teeth. And you spent this whole day showing me the other thing that world built, the thing I never charted, and I need to know if it's real or if it's just the shape you take right up until the boat, and then you're what I feared after all." His voice, for the first time, cracked. "I ran around the whole station to ask you that, because if it's real, if you go home quiet, if the thing I built sets itself down instead of teaching the holds to gut us, then I didn't destroy everything today. I found something. And I need that to be true more than I've needed anything, because I ran the cascade, girl. I put my hands on the port and I burned you, and I have to know whether I burned a monster or a child." The spoke was very quiet. The world turned. "You want absolution," Juno said, "from me. The person you tried to kill. I want the truth. Absolution isn't yours to give, and I wouldn't take it from you if it were." "No." She looked at him for a long moment, and Tuil, watching, saw her banked attention stop trying to read the wall of the Prime and simply look at him instead, the way one person looks at another. "I'll tell you the truth then, since you can't read it off me the way I read everyone else, and you'll have to decide whether to believe it, which is what the rest of the galaxy has to do with everyone all the time. Here it is, Prime. I don't know if it's real either." Ordal's 4 eyes narrowed. "I've spent the whole day choosing quiet," Juno said. sparing your guards, popping the enforcer's shell instead of his neck, walking to a boat instead of taking your station apart, which I could do. I want you to understand that I could. I can feel every weak seam in this place. I know how it comes apart. I've chosen not to, over and over, and it's cost me every time, and I keep choosing it. Her voice stayed level. But I don't know if that's restraint or just that I haven't been pushed far enough yet. Nobody knows what they are until the day they find the bottom of it. Maybe if you'd killed someone I loved on the way, maybe if the boat were already gone, maybe if I were a little more tired, maybe then I'd be the thing you feared. I can't promise you I'm not. Nobody could. She held his eyes. What I can tell you is that I've had 100 chances today to become it, and I've turned down everyone, and I'm going to keep turning them down all the way onto that boat if you let me, because I'd rather go home a person than leave here a weapon. That's not absolution. That's just what I've done so far and what I mean to keep doing. You'll have to decide whether it's enough. Same as anyone deciding about anyone. For a long moment Ves Ordal stood between the girl and the boats with all four arms still, deciding, in the place where his decisions lived, below thought, in the hands. And then his two loose hands moved, and Juno Hale did not flinch, because she still could not read him, because she had chosen, for the first time all day, to simply wait and see what a person would do. And the prime surgeon reached past her to the lifeboat cradle's control plinth, entered his prime's clearance, and released the berthing clamps on the nearest boat. "Go home quiet," he said, "and prove me wrong about the teeth. It's the only thing that makes any of this worth having done." That was when the station's point defense grid came alive along the rim, and Sethun's voice came through the spoke, thin and gray and final, and Juno Hale felt the overseer's last decision arrive a full breath before he spoke it. "Prime Surgeon Ordal," Sethun's voice said from the spoke speakers everywhere and nowhere, "reseat those clamps. That boat does not launch." Ordal did not reseat the clamps. "The subject is leaving, Maul. It's finished. Let her go and salvage what's left of your career from a live witness instead of a dead one." "The point defense grid is live along the rim," Sethun said, and Juno felt the truth of it arrive under his words like the floor of a cold sea. "Every launch corridor is covered. A lifeboat that leaves that cradle is a hull breach in progress, and the grid engages hull breaches automatically. That is not my order, Prime. It is standing station doctrine. I merely decline to suspend it. If she launches, the grid fires. If the grid fires, a lifeboat does not survive it. I am not killing anyone. I am simply not turning off a safety system during a declared emergency. Let her climb into the boat. Let her launch. The record will show she chose to." Juno stood at the open hatch of the lifeboat with one hand on the cold frame and read the thing Sethun had built, and it was, she had to admit, the best move he'd made all day. It was clean. It was deniable. It put her death on a machine and her name on the choice, and it worked precisely because it was true. The grid was real. The doctrine was real, and a boat launched into it would die, and no order with his name on it would ever be found. "He's right," she said quietly, "about the grid. I can feel it waking up along the rim, the emitters, the tracking, it's all coming live. If I launch, it fires." "If it fires," she looked at the blunt little boat. "This is a lifeboat, Sarat. It's built to fall away from a dying station and drift. It's not built to survive a defense grid. He knows that. He's not bluffing. That's the one thing about him I can read clean. He stopped being scared. He thinks he's won." "Then you take a different boat," Tuil said. "A shuttle and armed. They're all on the far side of the station through every corridor he owns, and the grid covers every launch corridor, not just this one. There's no boat on this station that launches and lives while that grid is up and the breach is declared." She said it flatly, working it, her banked attention spreading out across the whole bright machine of the station. "And the grid stays up while the breach stays declared. And the breach stays declared as long as Sethun wants it declared, because he's the overseer and he called it. So." She let go of the boat's frame. "The boat was never the way out. The boat was the bait. He wanted me to run for it so the grid could do what his order couldn't. I've been walking toward the trap all day, and I let myself, because I wanted the boat to be real so badly I stopped reading the man. Then what do we do? Tool's voice had gone high. If the boat's a trap and the grid covers everything and the breach won't clear. The breach clears when Sethune clears it, Juno said. That's the whole board, not the boat, not the grid. One frightened man who called a false emergency and won't uncall it because the second he does, the traffic hold lifts, and the moment the traffic hold lifts, Daishi's record and Paul's record and every log in that bay flush to the Concord relay, and he's finished. He's not keeping the breach up to kill me. He's keeping it up to keep the truth in the buffer. Killing me is just the bonus the grid gives him for free. She turned around, away from the boat, back up the long bright spoke toward the heart of the station. He'll hold that breach until I'm dead or until something makes holding it worse than clearing it. There's nothing on a lifeboat that changes that. The only thing that changes it is me, in a room with him, showing him the future where he doesn't clear it. Ordle stared at her. You're going back in, toward Sethune, away from the only boat you can reach. The boat's a coffin, Prime. You just released a coffin for me. Thank you, you meant it as a door, and I felt that you meant it and it matters. She was already walking. But the way out isn't through the grid. It's through the man who won't turn the grid off. I've spent all day letting him chase me toward his trap. Now I'm going to go sit down in front of him, where I read best, in a quiet room, and I'm going to show him every branch of what happens next until he finds the only one he survives, and then he's going to clear the breach himself. Because that's the thing about a coward, Prime. He'll do anything to live, even the right thing. You just have to make the right thing the only door left standing. She stopped and looked back at the two of them, the ruined Prime and the green young surgeon, standing in the flat white daylight of the wheeling world. You don't come, she said. Either of you. From here I go alone. Sarat, you've been sick 3 times covering ground for me and you're done. Go back to the bay, stand with Daishi and the clerk, keep the records alive because if I do my part and the truth's already been purged, then none of it meant anything. And Prime, she looked at Ordle for a moment, you asked me if the restraint was real. You're about to find out. Watch what I do to the man who tried to kill me, when I've got him alone in a quiet room and every reason in the galaxy to take him apart. Watch and then you'll have your answer about the teeth and you can decide what to do with it. That's the only absolution there is. Not a word from me. The thing you see with your own eyes. Then she turned and walked back up the spoke toward the administrative ring, small and gray and unhurried, into the station of a man who had just decided he'd won. And Tuil Sarat watched her go and understood that Mal Sethune had spent the whole day trying to corner a human, and had finally, catastrophically, succeeded. Because a cornered, quiet thing with nothing left to lose does not break. It sets its feet. And now the overseer had cornered the quietest, most patient predator in the catalogue, and she was walking to his door. Warden Sailmarn had put down 4 augmented subjects in 19 years of service, and she set her ambush for the 5th the way she'd set the others. 3 teams, 3 angles, a kill box in the ring junction where the spoke corridor met the administrative concourse, and no talking on the open channel. The overseer's brief was thin, loose human, sensory augment degraded, armed unknown presumed no. Approaching the administrative ring on foot, alone. Take her down soft if you can, hard if you must, but she does not reach the overseer's suite. Marn had read the brief twice and thought, degraded augment, no weapon, alone, on foot. This was not a hunt. This was housekeeping. She placed her first team behind the concourse pillars, her second in the maintenance recess above the junction, her third at her own shoulder in the mouth of the spoke corridor. And she waited for the small gray shape her forward optic had picked up walking, unhurried, up the middle of the corridor toward her. The human stopped 40 meters out. She was exactly what the brief said, small, gray with dried gel, barefoot, a bruise on her face, no weapon. She stopped in the open middle of the corridor, well short of the junction, well short of the kill box, and she stood there, and she looked at the empty concourse ahead of her as though it were not empty at all. "Warden," the human said. Marn did not answer. Nobody had used the channel. Nobody had said a name. The human was 40 meters away, alone, with a degraded augment, and she had just addressed the ranking officer of an ambush she could not see. By rank, into a corridor Marn had ordered kept silent. "You've got a team behind the third and fourth pillars," the human went on conversationally, not moving. "Another in the recess over the junction. The vents drawing wrong, cold air where there shouldn't be any. That's 4 bodies breathing in a space built for maintenance drones. And you're in the corridor mouth on my right, close, because you like to be where you can see the whole box. That's good doctrine. It's the doctrine I'd use. It works on anyone who can't feel you." She tilted her head. "I can feel you. All 12 of you. I've been feeling you since the last turn. I stopped here because if I take one more step you'll trigger the box, and then I'll have to make all 12 of you miss, and some of you won't, because I'm at 60 units now, not 500, and I'm tired, and I'm not what I was this morning. Somebody in your teams is fast enough to tag me before I clear the arc. Probably the one in the recess with the long launcher. So I stopped. To talk. Before anybody's daughter doesn't come home over a records dispute 3 decks up." Warden Sale Marn stood in the mouth of the corridor with 19 years of doctrine going quietly to ash, and made the mistake she would spend the rest of her career being grateful she made. She answered. "You can't feel 12 people," she said. "Not through pillars. Not degraded. The one behind the third pillar has a bad seal on his left gauntlet. It hisses when he tenses his hand, and he's tensing it because he's scared. The one in the recess just shifted her weight off a cramping leg. Your second team's 4th man is breathing too fast. He's new. This is his first real box, and he's going to fire early and wide the second I move, and hit your own first team across the concourse, because that's what green shooters do in a crossing box." The human's voice never rose. "You want to check any of that, Warden? Key your teams and ask. I'll wait. I'd rather you believed me now than found out in the next 10 seconds when it can't be taken back." Marn keyed her teams. She asked 3 questions, quietly, off the open channel. On the command band the human should not have been able to hear. "Bad seal on the left gauntlet, third pillar, confirmed. Cramping leg in the recess, confirmed. And the green 4th man, when Marn asked if his line of fire crossed first team's position, a long, sick pause, and then, affirm, Warden. If I fire on a mover I cross Dell's team. I flagged it at setup. Nobody answered." Marn had not answered. Marn had been thinking about the kill box, not the crossfire, because the brief had said degraded, no weapon, alone, and she had not built the box carefully because she had not thought she needed to. And a barefoot human 40 meters away, who could not see a single one of her people, had read the box better than the warden who built it, down to the flaw the warden herself had missed. "I'm not going to fight you," the human said. "I want you to understand that because everything about your training says I'm about to, and if you believe that, someone dies for nothing. I'm walking to the overseer's suite. I'm not going to hurt him either. I'm going to make him clear a false breach so a lifeboat can leave and a true record can send, and then I'm going home. That's all. Every person you lose stopping me, you lose so that Mal Sethune doesn't have to answer for burning a bonded kid alive for asking to go home. That's the sentence, Warden. Say it back to yourself, and decide if it's worth your 4th man's first box." Sale Marn looked down the corridor at the small gray shape that had dismantled her ambush without moving, and thought about the overseer's thin brief, and the word housekeeping, and the way the whole day had come to her second hand and wrong. "Stand down," she said on the open channel so the human would hear it too. "All teams, weapons down, seals up. Nobody fires." "Warden," the recess started. "I gave an order." Marn stepped out of the corridor mouth, into the open, into the human's line of sight, and she made her 4 arms visible and empty, because she wanted the small predator to read that she meant it, since apparently the small predator read everything. 19 years I've put down augments for this institute. Every one of them fought me. Every one of them I could tell myself I was stopping a danger. This one walked into my box and spent her one advantage, surprise, to warn me off it, so my green shooter wouldn't kill my own first team. That's not a danger. I don't have a word for what that is, but it isn't the word in the brief. She stepped aside, clearing the corridor to the concourse, to the administrative ring beyond. The overseer's suite is up the concourse and left. His personal guards on the door too, hand-picked. They won't stand down for me. That's the last of it between you and him. A pause. I never saw you. And whatever you do to Sethune in that room, I hope it's exactly what you said it'd be, and not one thing more, because a lot of us are about to find out whether the thing we've been guarding was ever worth guarding. The human looked at her for a moment, and something in her gray, tired face eased, just slightly. "Your fourth man," she said. "The green one. Tell him the flaw he flagged was real and nobody listened, and that flagging it was right, and he should keep flagging things even when nobody answers, because one day the thing he flags will be the thing that matters." She started forward past the pillars, past the team standing with their weapons down and their seals up and their forearms visible and empty, through the kill box that never triggered. That's how you build people who'd have stopped all of this before it started. You listen to the scared kid who flags the crossfire. Then she was through the junction and into the concourse, and Warden Sale Marn stood among her stood-down teams in the flat white daylight and watched the small gray shape walk toward the overseer's door, and keyed her command band one more time, and said, quietly, to no one who could help her and everyone who could hear, "Somebody wake up station command, not the overseer, above him. There's a thing loose on this station that we were told was housekeeping, and it isn't, and I think the overseer's about to learn that faster than any of us." The two guards at the overseer's door did not stand down. Juno felt them from the far end of the concourse, different from the ambush teams, harder, older, a stillness in them that the kill box crews hadn't had. These were Sethune's own, hand-picked, the kind of guard a careful administrator kept close for exactly the day everything else failed. They would not be talked past. She read that in them before she was close enough to see their faces. Two Sethvani in unmarked armor, no families on rotation in their thoughts, no green shooter's fear, just a flat professional certainty that the small human coming up the concourse was not going through the door they stood on. She stopped in front of them anyway. "He's told you I'm dangerous," she said. "He's right. He's told you not to let me pass. You won't. I can feel that there's no give in either of you, and I'm not going to waste both our time pretending there is." She looked from one to the other. "So here's the only thing I'll say. In about a minute, the man behind that door is going to do something that puts everyone on this ring in danger, including you, because he's out of clean moves and he's the kind of man who'd rather break the board than lose it. When he does, you're going to have to choose between the door and the people on this concourse. I want you to have heard before it happens that the door isn't worth it. That's all. I'm not going to try to get past you. I'm going to stand right here and wait, because there's about to be a better way through that door than you two, and it's going to be him opening it." The guards said nothing. They watched her. She stood 3 meters off, hands loose, and waited and read the man on the other side of the wall. Mal Sethune had stopped being calm. She could feel it climbing in him, the fear coming back up through the floor of the false confidence he'd built when the grid went live, because the loose human had not run for the boat and died on the grid the way the plan required. She had turned around. She was coming to him. And Sethune, who had spent 30 years making sure the dangerous part of every problem happened 3 decks away from his person, was about to have the dangerous part arrive at his door in the flesh, and there was nothing in his long, careful life that had prepared him for it. She felt him reach a decision. She felt it the way she'd felt every decision he'd made all day, a half-second before it finished, and this one was worse than any of the others, and she was already speaking before it left him. "Don't," she said to the door, to the wall, to the man behind it. "Sethune, whatever you just decided, don't. I can feel it, it's the breach. The real one this time. Don't you? Behind the door, Mal Sethune declared a genuine hull breach in the medical ring and armed the section's emergency isolation, and the station believed him, because he was the overseer, and the station did what an overseer's genuine breach declaration made it do. It began, deck by deck, to seal the medical ring behind blast irises and evacuate its atmosphere into the reclamation tanks, to save the rest of the station from a hull failure that wasn't there, starting with the outermost decks and working inward, toward the bay where Daisy and Toole and Paul, the clerk, stood guarding a sealed record, 3 decks out on the ring, on the wrong side of the closing irises. Juno felt it start. She felt the first blast iris slam somewhere out on the rim, and the air begin to move, and the count begin, the slow inward march of a station saving itself from a lie. He's venting the medical ring, she said aloud, and for the first time all day something like alarm moved through her flat gray calm. He's isolating it for a breach that isn't there. Daisy's out there. Sarat, the clerk, they're on the ring. If the isolation reaches the bay before someone stops it, it seals them in and pulls the air, and they die guarding the record, and the record dies with the station's own log when the buffer purges in an isolated section. She was moving now, not toward the door. She couldn't reach Sethune faster than the venting spread, but her attention had gone wide and fast, mapping the closing sequence, the irises, the timing, the one thread that might hold. He'd rather kill his own bay than let it send. He'd rather drown 3 of his own people than answer for me. That's the man. That's what was under the coward all along, not weakness. He'll break anything. The nearer of the 2 door guards spoke for the first time. The medical ring has staff on it. Dozens. He's venting it for a breach that, the guard stopped. There's no breach. I'd have felt the pressure change. There's no breach. There's no breach, Juno said. He made it up an hour ago to hold the traffic. Now he's making it real to bury the record. Your overseer is about to vent a live section of your station to erase the proof that he tried to kill me, and he's doing it from behind a door you're guarding for him. She looked at the 2 hard professional Sethvani, and she did not plead, because pleading was for people who couldn't see, and she could see exactly what was in them and exactly what it would take to move it. You wanted to know if the door was worth it. There's your answer, walking toward you deck by deck. So, you've got about 90 seconds before the isolation reaches the bay. You can spend them guarding a door for a man venting your own people, or you can open it and let me stop him before it gets that far. I can't make you. I can only tell you what's true, and I've been telling all of you what's true all day, and every single one of you who listened is still alive. Listen. Open the door. The 2 guards looked at each other. 19 years of doctrine had died in the kill box behind her. 30 years of an overseer's careful reputation was venting itself into the reclamation tanks in front of them. And the 2 hand-picked guards at Mal Sethune's door stood for one more second in the flat white daylight of the wheeling world, and then the nearer one turned and put his palm to the door he was sworn to hold, and entered the override that a personal guard was given for exactly one purpose: to reach his principal in an emergency. The principal couldn't survive alone. The door read the override as concern for the overseer's safety, which was what it was built to read, and it opened. And Juno Hale walked into the suite of the man who had spent all day trying to kill her, while 3 decks of his station sealed and emptied behind her, and found Mal Sethune standing at his control lectern with his 4 hands spread across it, and a genuine breach isolation marching inward toward his own bay. And she said, very quietly, in the flat cold voice she'd used on all of them, "Stop the venting, overseer, right now, and then you and I are going to have the conversation you've been running from since you stepped off that lift." Mal Sethune did not stop the venting. "You want me to stop it," he said. His 4 hands stayed spread on the lectern, and his filmed eyes had a new brightness, the brightness of a cornered man who has just found the one card that turns the whole hand. "Of course you do. Your surgeon's out there, the old woman, the clerk who thinks he's brave, 3 decks out on the ring on the wrong side of the isolation with about 70 seconds of airside left before the seal reaches them. He straightened. So here is where it finally turns human. Because there is exactly one hand on this station that can halt a genuine breach isolation once it's declared, and it's mine and it's on this lectern, and you can read every intention in my body but you cannot make my hands move. You proved that yourself in the bay. You read the prime's cascade coming and you could not stop it. You could only choose how to survive it. Well, read this coming. You can't stop it either. His voice had climbed into something almost joyful. You surrender the augment. You come to the cradle. You let me take back what's mine, on my terms, quiet and clean, and I halt the isolation and your 3 heroes live. Or you stand there reading me perfectly, helplessly, while they suffocate. I don't have to outthink you, girl. I just have to hold my hand still. Even you can't argue a section back to pressure. Juno stood in the middle of the overseer's suite with the venting count marching in her widened senses, and she read Mal Sethune all the way to the bottom, and what she found there was not a card that turned the hand. It was a man who had, at last, run out of decks to hide behind. You think you've cornered me, she said. Her voice did not rise, it never rose. You keep thinking that. You cornered the clerk and he set his feet. You cornered the warden and she stood down. You cornered the prime and he opened a boat. Everyone you back into a corner today stops running and turns around, and you still haven't noticed, because you've spent 30 years believing that a cornered thing breaks. That's the only thing you actually know about people, Sethune, how to corner them. And you're wrong about what happens next, every single time. She took one step toward him and he flinched, and she stopped, because she had felt him flinch coming and did not want to make it worse. Now let me tell you where you actually are, not where you think you are, where you are. The count marched. Somewhere out on the ring another iris slammed. Station command is awake, Juno said. Your warden woke them the second she stood down in the concourse. You can see it. The command band on your lectern is lit amber, and you've been ignoring it because you don't want to know. They're verifying the breach right now. It'll take them 90 seconds to confirm there's no hull failure, and when they confirm it, they countermand your isolation over your head, and they see that you declared a false genuine breach in a populated section, which is a capital offense with your name on it and no 1-3 decks away to hang it on. That's door 1. It closes in 90 seconds whether you touch the lectern or not. She did not blink. There are 2 sealed medical legal records in the bay buffer, the burning and the first false breach, and now there's the makings of a third, the real one, the one you just declared, the one venting your own people. 3 records you can't reach around. Every one of them ends your life as you've lived it. That's already true. That happened the moment you said the word. You can't unsay it. The only thing still moving is the number of bodies attached to it. You're stalling, Sethune said, but his 4 hands had gone very still in a new way, the stillness of a man doing arithmetic he doesn't like. I'm counting, Juno said, out loud so you can hear it the way I hear it. Right now the ledger says, disgraced overseer. Went around the ethics board, botched an augment, panicked, declared a false breach, tried to erase it. That's ruin. That's exile. That's the end of the copper bands. But it's not death, Sethune. A disgraced overseer who lost his nerve is a man the conquered strips and forgets. You survive that column, you live. She let it land. The other column, the one where you hold your hand still for 70 more seconds, that column has Daishi Oren and Tuil Sarat and a records clerk named Paul dead in a vented bay, plus however many staff are on the ring between here and there. That column isn't disgrace. That's a mass casualty declared under your authority for a breach you invented. That column, the conquered doesn't strip and forget. That column they execute. There's no 3 decks away on a body count that size. There's just your name and the number. Her flat gray eyes held his. You'll do anything to live. I've known that about you since the lift. It's the truest thing in you, and it's about to save 3 lives. Because the only branch left where Mal Sethune is still breathing a year from now is the one where you take your hand off that lectern in the next 10 seconds and halt the isolation yourself, before station command does it for you and takes even the mercy of having chosen it. I'm not asking you to be good. You can't. I'm telling you that living and stopping the vent are the same door now, and every other door is shut, and I shut them by seeing them before you did. 10 seconds, Overseer. Do the sum. You always do the sum. That's all you are. The Count marched. Amber light pulsed on the lectern. Mal Sethune stood over his controls with his 4 hands spread, and his filmed eyes flicking between the human and the command band and the isolation display. And Juno watched him run the ledger she had built for him, watched him check every column for the door she'd told him was shut and find it shut. And she felt the exact moment his arithmetic came out the way arithmetic always came out for a coward who wanted to live. His hand moved to halt the venting. And then, because he was Mal Sethune, and because a coward who has lost everything reaches for the one spiteful thing left, his other hand moved at the same time down, to the underside of the lectern, to the small personal defense charge every overseer station kept there for the day an asset came through the door, and Juno had felt that hand start to move a half-second before the first one finished, had felt both intentions form at once in a man who could finally, at the very bottom, be read like anyone else, and she was already moving. She did not cross the room to stop him. She couldn't. 60 units, tired, 10 feet of floor between them, and a Sethvani's lower arm already closing on the charge under the lectern. She would never have reached it in time by moving toward it. So she didn't move toward it. She moved toward the door guard. The nearer of Sethune's 2 hand-picked guards was standing just inside the suite, close to the lectern, his own sidearm holstered, watching his principal reach for a defense charge with the frozen horror of a man who has just realized which side of a line he's on. Juno reached him in 2 steps, and she did not take his weapon. She had promised herself all day she would not put a weapon in her own hand, and she kept it even now. She simply put her small hand flat on the back of his gauntleted one where it rested near his holster, and said, fast and low, his left lower hand under the lectern, a charge grab his wrist, not the charge, the wrist now, and the guard, who had spent the whole day watching this human be right about everything, moved on her word without deciding to. He was fast, and he was enormous, and he was already close, and he caught Mal Sethune's lower wrist against the underside of the lectern, a hair's breadth before the overseer's fingers closed on the charge. The 2 of them strained there for a moment, the big guard and the soft administrator, and then a second set of hands closed over Sethune's other 3 arms, the far guard crossing the room, and it was over. The overseer bent forward across his own lectern with his 4 arms pinned, and the defense charge still clipped in its bracket, untouched, live and harmless. Juno had not touched him. She stepped back and folded her own 2 hands and let the guards hold their principal and looked at the isolation display. The vent, she said. His right upper hand was already halting it when the other one reached for the charge. Check the display. Did the halt register before you pinned him? The nearer guard, holding Sethune down with 2 arms, worked the lectern with a 3rd. The isolation display stuttered. The inward march of the seals, 3 irises from the bay, 2, the air already thinning on the outer decks where the staff had run inward ahead of it, shuddered, and held and began, iris by iris, to cycle back. Halted, the guard said hoarse. It's reversing. Air's coming back into the outer decks. The bay, he checked, the bay never sealed. It got within 1 iris. 1. He looked up at the human. You cut it to 1 iris. He cut it to 1 iris, Juno said. I just made sure his hand got there before his other one killed him for good. He halted it himself. That matters for the record and for him. Log it that way. The overseer halted his own false breach. She looked down at Mal Sethune, pinned and shaking across his lectern, and there was no triumph in her, and no anger and no mercy either, exactly, just the flat, tired accuracy she'd carried all day. You did the sum, she said to him. I told you you would. You reached for the spite at the same time because you couldn't help it, but the halt got there first, and that's the only reason you're going to live, not because I spared you. because you finally, for 1/2 second, chose living over winning. Hold on to that. It's the closest thing to a good decision you made today, and you're going to need to remember you were capable of one. The command band on the lectern went from amber to green, and a new voice came into the suite, clipped and cold and very high up the chain. Station command. Above the overseer, awake now, verifying, countermanding, taking control of a ring that had come within one iris of a mass grave. This is Station Prime AL. Medical ring isolation is countermanded and confirmed false. Overseer Sethune, you are relieved and detained pending inquiry. All traffic holds are lifted station-wide effective now. A pause on the channel, and then, more slowly, the sound of someone reading something that had just landed in front of them. The medical buffer is flushing to the Concord relay. 3 sealed records. Who is in the overseer's suite? Report. The nearer guard keyed the band. Prime AL, Personal Guard Detail 2 holding the overseer detained. And he looked at the small gray human standing with her hands folded in the middle of the room and the subject. The human, she's here. She's not armed, she never was. A breath. Prime, whatever the records say she did, she's the reason there's one iris between us and a dead bay instead of a body count. I watched it. Put that in front of whoever you answer to before anyone decides what she is. Juno Hale walked to the suite's viewport while the channel filled with the noise of a station waking up to what had happened inside it, and she looked out at the blue world turning below, close and bright and enormous. And for the first time since she'd opened her eyes on the cradle, she let her widened senses go slack, let the flood of the whole station recede, and simply stood there, tired, and looked at a planet with her own 2 eyes. It's sending, she said to the room, to no one. The truth, all of it, that's the part I actually came back in for. She did not turn from the window. The boat can wait, the record couldn't. In the bay, the air had gone thin and cold before it came back. Tuil Sarat had felt the isolation reach them, the outermost iris of the medical ring slamming, then the next, marching inward while the pressure dropped, and old Daishi put Paul the clerk behind the reference archive's heavier bulkhead and stood with her 4 arms braced against the terminal as though she could hold the record in the room by will alone. Tuil had counted the seals coming. 3, 2. He had thought with a strange flat calm that he recognized, later, as the calm the human had worn all day. So this is how it ends, guarding a sealed log while a coward drowns us to bury it. And then the count had stopped. 1 iris out from the bay, the seal hanging half-cycled in its frame, the air already thin enough to burn and held, and reversed. And the pressure came grinding back into the room, and Paul the clerk sat down hard on the floor behind the archive and put all 4 hands over his face and made a sound that was not quite weeping, and Daishi Oren straightened up off the terminal and said, to the ceiling, in a voice like dry stone, "She reached him. The child reached him. He'd have vented us all, and she reached him anyway." Tuil had gone to the terminal then and watched the medical buffer flush. 3 sealed records, priority medical legal, lifting out of the station's throat and into the Concord relay where no overseer could reach them, out into the wide network where they would be read and cross-checked and answered. He watched the proof of the whole terrible day leave the station, and he understood that it was leaving because a barefoot human had walked back into the trap instead of onto the boat, and had spent the freedom she'd bled for all day to make sure the truth got out before she did. Station Prime AL came to the bay within the hour, and she was not what Tuil expected. He had braced for another Sethune, another soft administrator, another careful man measuring the day for the angle that saved him. But Al was old, older than Daishi, a lean gray Sethvani whose copper bands were worn thin with decades, and she came into the bay with 2 aides and no drones, and stood a long time in front of the burned tuning port, and the racked instruments, and the cradle where a human had lain past the top of the catalog, and she read the sealed records on a slate the whole time, and she did not speak until she had finished reading them. 41 years I have run this station, she said at last, to Daishi, to Tuil, to the room. I authorized the widening program. I told myself it stopped at the ethics board's line. I did not look closely at where Prime Ortal was taking it, because the results were extraordinary and the funding followed the results, and it was easier not to look. She set the slate down. That is my share of this. I will report it as mine. I have already relieved Sethune. I am relieving myself of the program effective now and referring the whole of it to the conquered magistrate, including my own negligence, because there are 3 sealed records leaving this station tonight, and I would rather my name be on the page that says, "I failed to look," than on the one that says, "and then I hid it." Her old eyes moved across them. Where is the human? In the overseer's suite, Tuil said. She wouldn't leave until the record's sent. She's watching the planet. He hesitated. Prime Aal. She's still logged as Institute property. Bonded salvage, lawful. When the magistrate reads the records, what happens to her? Legally. She's the evidence and the victim and the asset all at once, and the law is going to want to file her as one thing. Station Prime Aal looked at him for a long moment. The law is going to want to keep her, she said. You understand that. A perception past the top of the catalog, even burned down to 60 units. The conquered will not simply let that walk onto a frontier boat and go home. There will be a faction that wants her studied, and a faction that wants her contained, and a faction that wants her employed, and every one of them will have a good and lawful reason, and all of it will take years, and she will spend those years in a comfortable room somewhere being the most valuable question in the galaxy. Aal's voice did not change. That is what the law wants. I have spent 41 years serving what the law wants. Today I watched the law's most valuable question walk back into a trap to keep 3 of my people alive, and I find that I am no longer very interested in what the law wants. Daisy Oren made a low sound that might have been approval. There is a provision, Aal went on slowly, as a person walks out onto ice, for the repatriation of a bonded subject when the bondholder is found to have committed a capital offense against them. It voids the bond. It is old, and it is narrow, and it has been used 4 times in 2 centuries, and it exists precisely for the day an institute did to a subject what this institute did to her. Sethune's records establish the capital offense. Ortal's cascade establishes a second. The bond is voidable tonight by my authority as station master, before the magistrate's factions ever convene, if it is done fast and cleanly, and before anyone with an interest in keeping her thinks to file an injunction. She picked the slate back up. It will end my career. The factions will say I gave away the most valuable asset in the catalog on the night I could have held it. They will be right. A thin, worn smile. 41 years. I would like the last thing I do with this office to be the one thing I'm sure was right. Subsurgeon, go and get the human. Tell her the station master wants to void her bond and put her on a boat before morning, and wants her consent to do it, because she is nobody's property from the moment I sign it, and I will not move her like freight even to free her. Tuil Sarat stood in the bay where the whole day had begun, and felt something in his chest that he had no professional word for. She'll already know, he said, by the time I reach the suite. She'll have felt you decide it the second you decided. He was already moving toward the door. But I'll tell her anyway. She likes it, I think, being told a true thing out loud, even when she already knows, maybe especially then. Ves Ortal watched the whole of it from the bay, on the logs in real time. He had not gone to the boat and he had not gone to the suite. After he released the clamps and told her to go home quiet, he had walked back to his own bay on legs that did not entirely belong to him, and he had stood at the instrument bank beside the burned port he had burned, and he had watched the station's internal logs carry the small gray shape of her from the spoke to the concourse to the overseer's door, and he had watched, because she had told him to. Watch what I do to the man who tried to kill me when I've got him alone in a quiet room. Watch, and then you'll have your answer about the teeth. So he watched. He watched her walk into a kill box and talk 12 armed enforcers into standing down without a blow. He watched her stand in front of 2 hand-picked guards and tell them the door wasn't worth it. He watched Sethune vent the ring, watched the Count march toward the very bay Ordle was standing in, watched her not run, watched her put her hand on a guard's gauntlet and say his left lower hand, the wrist not the charge, and watched the overseer pinned across his own lectern with the defense charge live and untouched and maul Sethune alive. Alive, when she had every reason in the catalog to let him reach the charge and die of his own spite. Or to take him apart with the wide, cold competence Ordle had built into her, and she had done neither. She had made a coward halt his own atrocity, and she had let him live to answer for it, and she had not put a single weapon in her own 2 hands the entire day. Ves Ordle stood in his bay and had his answer about the teeth. It was not the answer that absolved him. She had told him it wouldn't be, and she had been right. The teeth were real. He had watched her read an armored ambush like a page, watched her thread a defense grid's worth of professionals without a scratch, and he understood better than anyone alive exactly how total the thing he'd made could have been if it had wanted to be total. Ordle had not been wrong about the danger. 10,000 of her, taught to the holds, would still be the end of everything he'd served. That much of his fear was true and would stay true. But he had been wrong about the one thing that mattered, and now he had watched the proof of it with his own 4 eyes. The danger and the restraint were the same creature. They were not 2 things, a weapon and a leash on the weapon. They were one thing. The same 4 billion years that had built the teeth had built the hand that would not use them, and you could not have the perception without the person, and the person, this specific barefoot child he had strapped to a cradle and burned, kept looking at the power to end them all and setting it down, not because a leash made her, but because that was what she was. He had spent his life believing the ceiling was a number. He had found, instead, that the ceiling was a choice, made over and over at cost, by someone who could have chosen otherwise every single time and didn't. He went to find her before they took her to the boat. She was in a transit lounge on the administrative ring, alone, sitting by a viewport with the blue world in it, and she did not turn when he came in, because of course she didn't. She'd felt him coming the length of the concourse. "You watched," she said. "I watched." And Ves Ordle stood a careful distance away, all 4 hands folded, an old surgeon in front of the ruin of his greatest work, and he said the only true thing he had left. "You were right that I couldn't have absolution from you, and you were right that I'd have to decide for myself whether the restraint was real, the way the rest of the galaxy decides about everyone without being able to see inside. I've decided." His voice was low and even. "It's real, and it doesn't make what I did smaller. I burned you. I put my hands on the port because a frightened man told me to, and because I was frightened too, and I destroyed the thing I spent my life reaching for, and I nearly killed you doing it. And the fact that you turned out to be the best of us instead of the end of us doesn't lighten a gram of that. It makes it heavier. I didn't burn a monster. I burned the proof that the thing I feared was never going to happen. That's mine to carry now. I wanted you to know that I'm going to carry it and not set it down, because you've spent all day teaching a whole station what it looks like to carry a thing instead of putting it on someone 3 decks away, and it turns out an old man can still learn it. Late, but he can learn it." Juno was quiet for a moment, looking at the planet. "They're going to strip you," she said. "The magistrate. The cascade was a capital act. Ayal's records make that clean. You release the boat and that'll count for something, and Daishi will speak for you, and it might be exile instead of worse. But you're finished as a prime whatever happens. You know that." "I know that." "Good." She said it without cruelty, the flat accuracy she'd carried all day. "You should be finished. Not because you're evil, you're not. You're just a man who wanted to know so badly he stopped counting the cost to the thing he was knowing. But that's exactly the man who shouldn't have his hands in anyone's head. So, be finished. Carry it. Teach the young ones who come after you why the ceiling isn't a place a person should stand, and why you don't get to harvest a substrate off a world that spent 4 billion years suffering into it and call it your result." She looked at him then, finally, And there was no forgiveness in it and no hatred either, just something level and clear. That's the closest thing to absolution there is, Prime. Not me telling you it's all right. It isn't. It's you spending the rest of your life making sure nobody does it again. I can't give you peace. I can only tell you the work that might someday earn you a little of it. Do the work. It's more than you gave me the chance to do this morning, and I'm giving it to you anyway, and you should notice that, because it's the whole thing you were afraid I couldn't do. Ves Ortal bowed his head, all four eyes closing, the old surgeon's gesture of a man accepting a verdict, and when he lifted it again the human had gone back to looking at the planet, and there was nothing more to say, and he did not try to say it. He turned and left her at the viewport with the blue world in it, and he carried the thing he had come to carry out of the room with him, and he did not set it down. Tuil found her at the viewport, and told her the true thing out loud anyway. Station Prime Al wants to void your bond, he said. Tonight, before the magistrates people can file to keep you. She wants your consent to do it. She said she won't move you like freight even to free you. There's a frontier packet leaving at the morning bell, unregistered. A bond crew hauler headed out past the relay line toward the settled worlds. She can put you on it. After that you're gone before anyone with an interest in holding you knows the bond was ever voided. I know, Juno said. I felt her decide it'll end her career. She was quiet a moment. Tell her yes. And tell her thank you, out loud, the way she did it for me. Because she's about to give away the most valuable thing on her station on the last night she'll ever run it. And she should hear a person say it mattered before the factions spend the rest of her life telling her it was a mistake. But it was not that simple, and she knew it was not, and she said so before Tuil could pretend otherwise. They're going to want the augment first, she said. Not Aal, the others. The magistrates' people, the cadres' people, whatever faction gets a voice before the packet leaves. Even burned down to 60, even ruined, there's never been a complete maximum widening that lived, and I'm the only record of it that walks and talks. They'll want to map what's left. Study the burn pattern. Learn how to build it again without the ceiling that kills. They'll be polite about it, they'll call it a debrief. And somewhere in the polite version there'll be a question that's really, teach us how to make more of you but controllable this time. She looked at Tuil. That's the whole thing your Prime was afraid of, isn't it? Not me. The next 10,000. He was right to be afraid of it. So the last thing I do on this station matters as much as anything I did all day, and it's this. I'm going to tell them no. And I'm going to tell them why. And you're going to help me make sure the why gets into the record with the rest of it, so it's still there after I'm gone. Station Prime Aal came herself, with the two aides and a slate, and she did not disguise the debrief as anything but what it was, and Juno gave her the answer she'd prepared at the viewport, and it went into the record, sealed with all the rest. You want to know how to build it again without the part that kills, Juno said. I'll save you the years, you can't. Not because the science is beyond you, you'll crack the science, you're good, you'll figure out how to widen a mind without burning it out inside a month. That part you'll solve. She sat with her two hands folded, small and gray and certain. What you can't solve is that the thing you're actually trying to build isn't a wider sense. It's a person who can't be lied to and can't be surprised and can feel every intention in every room. And you can only get that person by taking someone who already carries 4 billion years of reasons to read a room that closely, and opening them all the way up. And the same 4 billion years that make the senses worth widening are the years that make the person decide what to do with it. You don't get to keep one and skip the other. The teeth and the hand are the same animal. If you build 10,000 of us, you don't get 10,000 instruments. You get 10,000 people who can see exactly what you are, and some of them won't have spent the day I spent deciding to go home quiet, because you'll have taken them the way you took me, bonded off a frontier crew with no house to answer for them, and they'll have every reason your overseer gave me and none of the reasons to set the teeth down. She let it land. That's not a program. That's how a civilization ends, not with a fleet. With 10,000 small gray people who know when you're lying, walking home to worlds that hate you, carrying the one thing you can't take back once you've handed it over. Write that in the record, Prime. Write that the ceiling asked you not to chase the ceiling. It's the most useful thing I know, and it's the only thing I'll teach you, and I'm teaching it so you never learn the rest. Eyal wrote it in the record. And then the old station master voided the bond. A few words, a sealed authority, 41 years of service spent on the last night to unmake a single line of salvage law, and Juno Hale was, for the first time since a frontier crew had sold her debt to an institute, nobody's property at all. She thanked Eyal out loud. The old Sethvani took it the way a person takes a thing they will need later, and folded it away, and left to go and answer for her whole career to people who would never understand why she'd ended it this way. That left the cost. Tuil saw it settle on her when the room was empty, not grief exactly and not fear, but a kind of tired arithmetic of her own, the first he'd seen her turn on herself all day. "You're wondering what it's like now," she said before he could ask. "Going home, at 60 units. Whether it fades, whether it heals, whether one morning I wake up ordinary again and only hear the things that make a sound." She looked at the planet. "It doesn't fade. Daishi already ran the numbers with me while we waited. 60 units is stable. It's not the flood, I can live in it, sleep in it, it won't burn me out. But it's not going away either. This is what I am now. I'm going to walk onto a hauler full of bond crew tomorrow and feel every intention on it, every lie, every man deciding whether the small, quiet woman is worth robbing. I'm going to sit at a table on a settled world someday and know, before anyone speaks, exactly what everyone at it means. Forever." Her voice did not break. It never broke. "You people gave me a thing nobody asked for and can't give back, and the price isn't the flood or the burn or the day I spent walking through your traps. The price is that I'll never again be in a room and not know. That's a kind of a loan your catalog doesn't have a number for. I'll carry it. I'm good at carrying things. That's the other thing 4 billion years builds. But you should know it's there, Sarat, in the record under all the rest. What it cost, not just what it did." Tuil Sarat, who had laid her lattice with his own 2 hands, stood in the empty lounge and had no true thing to say that was large enough. And so he said a small one, which was the only kind he had. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, and I'm glad you're going home, both, at once. I don't know how to hold both, but I'm holding them." "That's the whole trick of being a person," Juno said, and for the first time all day something almost like warmth moved through the gray. "Holding both at once. You'll get better at it. You're already better at it than your prime. Go stand with Daishi. She's going to need someone young to hand the good part of this place to, now that the rest of it's coming down." She turned back to the window. "I'll be gone at the morning bell. You don't have to see me off. But thank you for being sick in the right direction all day. It helped, knowing which way the honest one leaned." The morning bell came, and the station was different under it. The medical ring had reopened. The false breach was a matter of record now, not of air, and the corridors Juno walked to the docking spoke were lined here and there with people who had heard. Not a crowd, the Conquered did not make crowds, and the Institute least of all, but a scattering of them. Surgeons and techs and one squat off-duty enforcer with a bad left gauntlet, standing at the edges of the concourse as the small gray human went by, watching her the way people watch a thing they will tell wrong for the rest of their lives because the true version is too strange to be believed. Warden Salemarn stood at the junction where her kill box had been, 4 arms folded, and inclined her head a precise degree as Juno passed, and Juno returned it, and neither of them said anything, because everything worth saying between them had already been said in a corridor with 12 weapons trained, and none of them fired. Daishi Oren waited at the docking iris. The oldest surgeon in the cadre stood alone by the airlock with her thin, worn bands and her 4 steady eyes, and when Juno reached her, she did not offer a hand or a farewell in the human style, because she was 91 and Sethvani, and had never once in her life pretended to be anything else. They'll ask me in the inquiry what we made here, Daisy said. The magistrate, the factions, they'll want a clean answer, an asset, a breakthrough, a disaster, a weapon. One word they can file. Her eyes held the girl's. I'm going to tell them we made a mirror and we didn't like what it showed us and we tried to break it rather than look, and it turned out the mirror was kinder than the people holding it. That's the true answer. They won't file it. But it'll be in the record under the rest, next to the price you named, and someday a young surgeon nobody's born yet will read it and understand it before they touch anyone's head, and that'll be the thing that came out of this bay that was worth the coming out. She paused. You gave me an afternoon worth spending, child. I told you I had nothing left but afternoons. You made one of them matter. An old surgeon doesn't forget the last thing that mattered. Go home. Do the work you told Ordle to do, Juno said. Both of you. He'll carry it too heavy and you'll carry it too light, and between you it might come out about right. Something eased in her gray face. Thank you for laughing, in the bay, when you first understood. Everyone else went still and you laughed. And it was the first thing all day that told me there was a person in this place I could talk to. Turned out there were more than one. That's more than I expected when I woke up on your table. Then the iris opened, and she went through it, onto the frontier hauler that would carry her out past the relay line, and the airlock closed behind her, and the Meridian Institute let go of the most valuable thing it had ever held because a handful of its people, on one strange day, had each decided in turn that some things are worth more than holding. The hauler was called the Sable Reach, and it was old and loud and smelled of coolant and bond crew, and its master was a hard cephalopodcast haulier named Ves Anu, who had taken an unregistered passenger off a station master's private word and asked no questions because the private word had come with a hold's worth of fuel credit. Juno felt the crew the moment she stepped aboard. 9 of them. She felt the 2 in the aft hold deciding whether the small, quiet human woman traveling alone with no house and no escort was worth the trouble of relieving of whatever she carried. She felt the calculation form, the way she felt every calculation now, the way she would feel every calculation in every room for the rest of her life. 2 bond crew hands, hungry, a long haul ahead, an easy mark. She walked aft into the hold before they'd finished deciding. You're wondering if I'm worth robbing, she said, into the dim to the 2 of them before either had moved. I'm not. I've got nothing but the clothes and a voided bond and a headache the size of a station, but that's not really why you're going to leave me alone. She stood in the doorway, small and gray and entirely calm, and let them feel that she was not afraid, which was the strangest thing either of them had ever felt off a mark. You're going to leave me alone because I can tell right now which of you is the one who talked the other into it and which one already regrets it, and I'm going to sit down at your mess table tonight next to the one who regrets it, and I'm going to be kind to him, and by the end of this haul he's going to wish he'd never listened to his friend. That's all. No fight. I don't fight. I just already know how it ends, and so now do you. She turned and left the hold. There's a place at the table for both of you if you want it. There usually is. Most people take the worse road because they think nobody's watching. Somebody's always watching now. Might as well be watched being the better thing. She sat at the mess table that night, and one of the 2 came and sat across from her, quiet and ashamed, and she was kind to him. And by the 3rd day of the haul he was the one who brought her the extra ration and asked, haltingly, about the world she was going home to. She had chosen quiet again. She kept choosing it. It kept costing her the easy road and the closed door and the room where nobody knew her, and she kept choosing it anyway, all the long way out past the relay line toward home. The record went out ahead of her, the way records do, and it did its slow work across the relay line while the Sable Reach hauled her home. By the time the hauler crossed into settled space, the conquered magistrate had read all 4 sealed records, the burning, the first false breach, the second real one, and the strange 5th file that was only a young human telling a station master why the ceiling had asked her not to chase the ceiling. The widening program was ended, quietly, the way the conquered ended things it did not want spoken of. No announcement, No trial made public, just a line in a ledger and a sealed door, and a directive that the substrate of a suffering world was not a resource to be harvested, filed under an old law nobody had thought to invoke in 2 centuries. Prime Surgeon Vess Ordle was stripped and exiled to a teaching post on a cold border world, where, by every account that filtered back, he spent the rest of his years telling candidates why the thing they most wanted to build was the thing they must never build, and carrying and not setting down. Station Prime Aal lost her office exactly as she'd known she would, and the faction said exactly what she'd known they'd say, and she went to live near Dashi Oren, and the 2 old Sethvani were sometimes seen at a daylit viewport arguing about whether the mirror had been kind or only accurate, which was, Dashi said, the same argument they'd been having their whole lives and finally had a name for. None of it reached Juno Hale, out past the relay line, and she did not go looking for it. She had felt enough intentions for one lifetime. She wanted, for a while, to feel only the ones in front of her. The settled world she came home to was called Harlow's Rest, a hard green frontier world of long light and low houses, a register-sable world by the Concord's cold catalog, which meant it had spent a few billion years killing everything that stopped paying attention, which meant it had made people who paid attention, which was the whole reason a distant institute had ever come looking for salvage crews to buy. It was not a beautiful world. It was hers. She had been sold off it with a debt around her neck at 19, and she came back to it at 20 with no debt and no house still, and a thing behind her eyes that would never switch off. And she walked down the ramp of the Sable Reach into the long green light and stood in it and breathed. Her mother was at the field's edge. She had not been told which hauler or which day, only that a voided bond notice had come through the relay with her daughter's name on it, and no explanation the settlement's clerk could parse. She stood at the fence in her work clothes, small and dark and ordinary, the way Juno was small and dark and ordinary, and she did not run, because Harlow's Rest did not run at things, and Juno crossed the field toward her at an unhurried walk. She felt her mother from halfway across the field. She would feel everyone now for the rest of her life, every hope and grief and small daily calculation of every person she would ever stand near, a closeness that was also the deepest kind of alone, a room she could never fully leave. She felt her mother's fear and her mother's disbelief, and under both of them, plain and enormous and without a single thing hidden in it, her mother's relief, and Juno Hale understood, walking into it, that this was the one intention in the whole galaxy she had ever been glad to read before it was spoken. "They did something to you," her mother said when she was close, not a question. A mother's eyes, reading a daughter the old slow human way, catching the thing behind the eyes that would never switch off. "Out there, they did something. They tried to make me into the most dangerous thing in the galaxy," Juno said. "It didn't take the way they wanted." She stopped at the fence. "I'll tell you all of it. Some of it's hard. Most of it I walked away from. The part that matters is that I chose to come home over and over every step when there were other things I could have chosen, and I kept choosing this." She looked at the low houses and the long light and the ordinary people already drifting to the field's edge to see who'd come off the hauler. "That's the part I want you to hear first. Whatever else they made me, I'm the one who kept choosing the fence." Her mother reached across it and put a hand against her daughter's bruised face, and Juno let her, and did not flinch, and for a moment, a single ordinary moment in the long green light of a world that had spent 4 billion years teaching its children to see clearly and choose well, she let the wide cold flood of everything recede, and felt only the one warm hand, and only the person it belonged to, and nothing else at all. The galaxy never learned how close it had come. The record stayed sealed, the program stayed ended, the 10,000 were never built. Out past the relay line, a handful of aliens who had been there carried what they'd seen and did not set it down, and told it wrong for the rest of their lives because the true version was too strange, and the true version was only this. They had reached for the top of the catalog and found a girl who could see straight through them, and been spared, not because she couldn't end them, but because she looked at every reason to and chose instead to walk home and be kind at a stranger's table and put her face into her mother's hand in the long light of a hard green world. That was the ceiling. It had been the ceiling all along, not the senses, the choosing. She stayed. She grew older on the world that made her. And when, now and then, some frightened thing from out past the relay line came sniffing after the rumor of the human who could not be lied to, it found a quiet woman at a fence in the long light, who felt it coming a long way off, and who looked at it steadily until it understood that whatever it had come to take had already freely been kept. And then it went home, the way they always went home, having learned the one thing her whole world had been built to teach. You do not get to keep the teeth without the hand. They are the same animal, and the animal chose the fence.